Testing? All right, perfect.
Recording in progress.
Let's go ahead and get started, please. For everybody that's watching for this meeting, just want to let everybody know that the local channel 77 is down and that the simulcast is only on YouTube and via Zoom at this time. Once again, channel 77, which is the local channel, is down. And if you want to watch the meeting, it would be on YouTube or Zoom. Thank you. I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'd like to ask everybody to please silence all phones, beepers, if they still have them, and so forth. Good evening. This board is comprised of 7 members. 4 members of the board shall constitute a quorum, and the affirmative vote of 4 members shall be necessary for the adoption of any motion. If only 4 members of the board are present, an applicant may request and be entitled to a continuance to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board. If a matter is continued due to a lack of quorum, the chairperson or secretary of the board may set a special meeting to consider such matter. In the event that 4 votes are not obtained, an applicant, except in the case of a comprehensive plan amendment, may request a continuance or allow the application to proceed to the City Commission without a recommendation. Pursuant to Resolution Number 2021-118, the City of Coral Gables has returned to traditional in-person meetings. However, the Planning and Zoning Board has established the ability for public to provide comments virtually. For those members of the public who are appearing on Zoom and wish to testify, you must be visible to the court reporter to be sworn in. Otherwise, if you speak without being sworn in, your comments may not have evidentiary value. Lobbyist registration and disclosure. Any person who acts as a lobbyist must register with the city clerk as required pursuant to the city code. As chair, I now officially call the City of Coral Gables Planning and Zoning meeting of June 12, 2024 to order. The time is 6:02. Jill, if you please call the roll.
Robert Behar.
Here.
Julio Gabriel.
Here.
Sue Kavinsky.
Here.
Felix Pardo.
Here.
Javier Salmon.
Here.
Chip Withers.
Here.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Here. Notice regarding ex parte communications. Please be advised that this board is a quasi-judicial board that requires board members to disclose all ex parte communication and site visits. An ex parte communication is defined as any contact, communication, conversation, correspondence, memorandum, or other written or verbal communication that takes place outside a public hearing between a member of the public and a member of a quasi-judicial board regarding matters to be heard by the board. If anyone made any contact with a board member regarding an issue before the board member must state on the record the existence of the ex parte communication and the party who originated the communication. Also, if a board member conducted a site visit specifically related to the case before the board member must also disclose such visit. In either case, the board member must state on the record whether the ex parte communication and or site visit will affect the board member's ability to impartially consider the evidence to be presented regarding the matter. The board member should also state that his or her decision will be based on substantial, competent evidence and testimony presented on the record today. Does any member of the board have such communication and or site visit to disclose at this time?
Yes, I do. No.
Yes, sir.
I was contacted via phone by a resident.
I think your mic is not.
Okay. I was contacted via phone by a resident because she is out of town and was concerned whether she had received the right notice or not. And then I told them to please contact the planning board, which she did.
Thank you.
And that was today.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Swearing in. Everyone who speaks this evening must complete the roster at the podium. We ask that you print clearly so the official records of your name and address will be correct. Now, with the exception of attorneys, all persons physically in the City Commission chambers who will speak on agenda items before us this evening, please rise to be sworn in. Thank you. Zoom platform participants. I will ask any person wishing to speak on tonight's agenda item to please open their chat and send a direct message to Jill Menendez stating you would like to speak before the board and include your full name. Jill will call you when it's your turn. I ask you to be concise for the interest of time. Phone platform participants. After Zoom platform participants are done, I will ask phone participants to comment on tonight's agenda item. I also ask you to be concise for the interest of time. First, we have the approval of the minutes, which would be May 8th, 2024. Is there a motion?
So
Motion
moved.
to approve, second?
Sorry, go ahead.
Felix, you have a motion?
To move the,
Second?
Second? Any comments? No? Call the roll, please.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
Zuka Walensky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
yes.
Javier Salmon,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
AB Eisenstadt.
Yes. The procedure we'll use tonight, first we'll have the identification of agenda item by the Madam City Attorney. Then we'll have the presentation by the applicant or the agent, followed by the presentation by staff. We'll go ahead and open it for public comment, first in chamber, followed by Zoom, and then the phone line platform. We'll go ahead and then close the public comment, have board discussion, and a motion and further discussion if needed, and a second motion. Then we'll have board's final comments and a vote. Mr. Behar?
You ready?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I want to recuse myself for item, I guess it's 1 and 2, E1 and E2, for the reasons that the developer of this project is a client of mine, so I want not to have a conflict with that item. In addition, even though it's been clear before, my son is one of the attorneys on the project as well. So in an abundance of conscience, I want to recuse myself for those item E1 and E2.
Okay, but you're recusing yourself not because your son is,
No, I'm recusing myself because this, to
client.
me, is my client.
Okay.
I know that I spoke to city attorney, and she's, abundant of, mentioning, but that's something that I already did with our previous city attorney. It was clear, it was not an issue, but just in case, I want to make sure it's transparency that there's,
thank you.
there's that.
And you'll be here for the other items?
If you make it quick.
Okay.
Mr.
thank you.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Before Robert leaves, the deferral of Riviera Country Club, should we recognize that they've been deferred for the public?
We did not on this one, but there is no,
I received
Jill?
the letter there.
That was.
Yes, that was an attachment to the minutes.
Right.
Because it was presented that day at the last Planning and Zoning Board
Okay.
meeting. Therefore, it was part of the minutes.
Okay.
It was the applicant requesting that the item be deferred.
I thought they had asked for another deferral, that's why the attachment. Okay.
got
Thank
it. Okay. Yes, Chip?
Do we want to just go to the Mediterranean bonus so Robert can stay and then leave afterwards, or?
That's a great idea.
I don't know, I'm just, is
If everybody's,
Thank you.
o-
That
if
would be
everybody's
good.
okay with that, I'll go ahead and move it.
that okay with the board?
Fine. Sounds great.
Thank you.
Madam City Attorney?
Okay, so we will begin with E3. E3 is an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for text amendments to the City of Coral Gables Official Zoning Code, Article 5, Architecture, Section 5-200, Mediterranean Standards, Article 3, Uses, Section 3-402, Restrictions related to location, and Article 16, Definitions to enhance the quality of Coral Gables Mediterranean design by requiring a conceptual design review, removing duplicative criteria, relocating inapplicable standards, supplementing existing criteria, and including additional Mediterranean building examples, providing for severability, repeater codification, and for an effective date. We have our planning official who will present.
Thank
Good
you.
evening, Jennifer Garcia, planning official. If I could have the PowerPoint, please. So we discussed at the last meeting. There haven't been a lot of updates, but there's been a few. So I want to go through this just so you feel comfortable and what you're looking at today. So remember, we've had discussion and feedback with the Board of Architects several times, the City Commission, as well as with the Planning and Zoning Board, and how now we are starting the actual adoption process, which starts with Planning and Zoning recommendation and then City Commission for 2 readings. So the intent and the purpose is being altered a little bit to strengthen the purpose of the Mediterranean bonus. This is a reminder, there are redundant criteria in our zoning code that was copied during the zoning code update from the med bonus criteria to the underlying zoning, so that's being strucken through. There's relocation of some certain criteria from the med bonus to more appropriate section of our zoning code as part of this as well. And then incorporating a lot of the provisions of the architecture standards from the Mediterranean Village architectural standards, which created the plaza, into this proposed changes. Expanding the list of architectural precedents is also part of this. And the new thing is actually including character-defining features of Mediterranean design. And I'll get to that in a second. So again, these are pages from this noise is quite loud.
We're contacting facilities so we can address it. So
It's
I'm
okay,
doing that right
thanks.
now.
So these are pages from our zoning code update, highlight or sections that were copied and pasted from the current standards of our Mediterranean bonus into the underlying zoning districts and other parts of the zoning code, such as landscape, parking, and such. And then this is what you're seeing today, right now on the screens is screenshots of the proposed changes to the med bonus and how some of these more maybe not architecture related criteria is moving to more appropriate parts of the code. And then these are just pages from the Mediterranean Village PAD architectural standards and how some of these ideas and standards are being incorporated into what's proposed today for standards for Mediterranean architecture bonus. And then these are current precedents, architectural example buildings, basically. We talked about last time about removing San Sebastian apartments, and since then we've had feedback from the public to also remove Granada shops, just because we don't have a lot of good drawings and elevations and plans and really any permit drawings from Granada shops. So it's been proposed to actually eliminate that as an example for architects to follow when they're proposing new buildings. We talked about last time incorporating some new buildings. These 6 buildings are done by what we call founding architects. You'll recognize names like George Fink, Schultz Weaver, Phineas Paste. These are our founding architects that create a lot of these good buildings and Coral Gables. So we've found some of those examples here in South Florida and incorporating that as examples for architects to follow. And then what's new are these 3 new buildings done by Martin Hampton, the Antilia Hotel, which was demolished, unfortunately, up in North Ponce area, Flora Garden Apartments building, which is in Hollywood, and the Spanish apartment, which is also called the Villa de Leon in Tampa. These were local examples we talked about last time that weren't done by our more common architects of the 1920s, but they're still good examples for precedence, as well as some other examples outside of our city, Santa Barbara City Hall and the Veneta Hotel in Palm Beach. And then what's new, Vizcaya was a good example that came up. There you are. That came up at last meeting. Yeah, you did a little switch. I see that. As well as Everglades Club in Palm Beach Town Hall, and also General Life Garden, which is in Granada, Spain, were other examples that came up. We went through these additional examples we got from the public through Board of Architects, and they agreed that having these examples would be helpful for architects in the future to follow during their building development phase. What's also new is what's called character-defining features. So I know this is like very small and hard to read, but I'll quickly go through them. So asymmetry, projecting in recessed bays, articulation, different textures in the facade, ornate entrances, towers, varied roof types. A lot of these features that you see in those precedent buildings are basically being kind of dissected and put line by line. And so the intent here is that an architect that's not familiar with Mediterranean architecture, who is going to do a Mediterranean building in Coral Gables, will be able to highlight different character-defining features of the proposed building by using this as kind of a start. So the prerequisites table has not changed. There's been some reorganization, but hasn't changed since the last time we went through it during the last meeting discussion. And again, you'd have to fulfill the architecture precedents, the building examples, as well as that prerequisites table that I just showed you right here. And that basically allows you to enter in the med bonus criteria to be able to apply for med bonus. to actually get the mud bonus, you have to fulfill level 1 and level 2. Level 1, again, hasn't changed since we spoke about last meeting for discussion. And if you're a multifamily building, it fulfills 6 of the 12 of all these requirements. And if you're a mixed-use building, it fulfills 8 of the 12. That's standard. That's already in our code right now. It's not really changing. So once you fulfill those requirements of the level 1, then you are maybe granted by the Board of Architects that additional story, additional med bonus. And then level 2 hasn't changed, as we talked about last meeting as well. And that would grant you the top highest level of med bonus, which would be the second level or third level, depending if what you're high rise or high density. So again, you have to comply with architecture precedents. The prerequisites compliance is for the first table we went through. Table 1 med bonus and table 2 med bonus to be able to fulfill the whole med bonus requirement. That's it.
Can you, I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Can you go back to the bonus level 1 table?
This one?
Yeah. In order to get the level 1, if you do residential, you have to get 6 of 12.
Yes, it's not
And-
changing.
Okay, but I see that you're scratching out a lot of those. How am I getting, the proposed is on the right, so vertical hierarchy, for example. Do we have a more defined way to get there, or is that, because that's, to me, sounds arbitrary.
I think that was part of the discussion we had as
You know,
far as being arbitrary.
It's not specific, it's not like, well, who's gonna argue yes or no? I mean, to me, and I see the changes, but that particular is one that, how do we, are more defined solution?
So did you read the language that goes with the vertical hierarchy, number 3? We can go over it. I think it's here.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to add something. I understand what Robert is talking about, which is, at this particular point, at this particular point, you're looking at words, but the specific example of those elements that have to be added to be able to qualify are not there. They're expressed in words that are too loose and not tight enough. And the other thing is that, we've struggled with this. This is supposed to be able to enhance a specific style. The examples are wonderful. Now they're all over the state of Florida, all over the country. But the specific elements are not qualified in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's what you're concerned with, and rightfully so.
And out of all of them, that was the one that caught my attention. So how do we determine what is compliance, and from that wording?
And the thing is, it is a toolbox for the designer, but it's also a toolbox, that the Board of Architects understands. Because
Right.
if not, Robert's going to be hitting his head against, the table there every time he comes in, because the elements aren't specific. So when you say vertical hierarchy, there's no example. You're looking at certain things, but it's too loose. Obviously, in the hands of someone that's very good at what they do, they understand it, they could get there, but it's not made for everyone to understand. It's very difficult to interpret.
Right. So this particular one, I believe, was taken from the Mediterranean Village.
And not so much for the
Handbook?
designer,
So
but when the Board of Architects, that's very subjective.
Sure is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's become more subjective with this change. There's no doubt.
The idea is that this update would be accompanied with some kind of updated best practice manual, and to show diagrams like this that are basically analyzing some of these precedent examples that we're going through and showing what the Board of Architects should be looking for.
The other thing is that the appendix that was added to the code by the previous planning director which was specifically for the plaza. They did a better job there in explaining what they were doing. But that doesn't necessarily apply to everything. You mentioned it, but it's not necessarily adaptable to this. I think that this will create tremendous confusion and frustration between the applicant or the developers, the Board of Architects, and then at the end of the day, the residents who are going to see something that is either good or not good, and that qualifies or doesn't qualify. So, we're almost like reinventing part of the wheel here, because when we had the Mediterranean Committee get together, and they were all architects and all kicking it around, and Robert and I sat on that board, and we were looking at these things. We had examples of things that were given Mediterranean bonus before, which were not specifically Mediterranean. And that was one of the biggest hurdles to get there. And philosophically, I think you have an issue with this. I don't see a betterment in this particular proposal, and I think it needs more specific work. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying it needs more specific work.
Are you saying that when somebody brings in a project to get approved for Mediterranean bonus, you're going to show them that diagram and say it has to look more like this?
No, so the idea was that a lot of these diagrams from the Appendix C would be incorporated into what's now being used as the best practices manual, which is on our website, that architects could use as far as reference. It doesn't include all these diagrams. I don't even think it includes this one. So this is kind of explain what this text is saying. When it talks about top and middle and bottom and where to put the emphasis and where to put your entrance, it's kind of illustrated here. So the idea is that once this maybe get adopted, that this would also include an update to our best practices manual to help architects be able to illustrate and understand the intent of this language.
Are there definitions, or, I'm going to ask the architects on the board, is there a guide or something that can be implemented into the code that you have to put in X amount of features, not just it has to look like this, or this is a picture of it to qualify?
In the reference of the best practice, there was an attempt, and it was more of a graphic interpretation of these are the elements. But when you're designing, it's very difficult to look at this and be able to say to yourself, well, it looks good, but on top of that, I'm going to get that check off. Because the whole point here is that, this is all about bonuses. And that's where I personally have a philosophical issue with that. And that is that I think that the Mediterranean bonuses have run their course. I think that if you really look at this and you want to look in certain areas, and you're trying to promote, very good design, there are certain elements that are very different than just based on a specific style. And the other thing is that there are, in my opinion, there are certain areas where if you wanted to look at a bonus, you should be looking at those areas. And in my opinion, my personal opinion is that I think that the bonuses are discretionary, and I think that they've run their course. And one of the difficulties that you're going to get is that you're going to have people that are trying to design really nice projects, but the safety blanket that we have in the city of Coral Gables is the Board of Architects and their commitment to making sure that good quality architecture is approved, whether it's modern, whether it's Mediterranean, whether it is whatever, but it's all about very good design.
What do you mean by it's run its course?
When dating myself, when we looked at the showroom on Ponce and we had to tear it down and come up with something so the historic board wasn't going to go crazy, we came up with the first Mediterranean Revival commercial building. And then the Mediterranean ordinance was written around to be able to incentivize that because it costs so much more to build that versus, other types of architecture. Not that other types of architecture were worse, but it was giving them an even playing field. And I think over time, we've seen that some of these buildings that have qualified for the Mediterranean bonus really aren't necessarily Mediterranean, or they're not necessarily good. Some are exceptional. But then again, some of the architecture is exceptional, not being Mediterranean. So that's the reason I say that I don't think that it's needed anymore. I think it's more of a pressing issue of finding a way to come up with better architecture.
So what you're saying is, so you're advocating that we shouldn't have a Mediterranean bonus in the city or in the code?
Well, if you're going to provide bonuses, in my opinion, there are certain areas, in the city, commercial areas, let's say, where maybe you could incentivize it by providing certain things. Not mixing apples and oranges. For example, much has been said about, well, if you provide a park, we'll give you another floor. And that's an incentive, especially in a certain area. There are other areas, for example, in the city that require that you provide Mediterranean architecture with no bonuses. So that is, and that is because it's more of a compatibility with the area, with the neighborhood, and that kind of thing. And I was criticized by former commissioners about the word compatibility. We all know what compatibility means. Does it look like it belongs here or not? There's no doubt in my mind that any of the architects that are sitting in this room today can do something that looks really, really good, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that. But there may be other reasons to provide an incentive in other parts of the city, but not necessarily where it's going to usurp the surrounding compatibility with the neighborhood.
So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that Mediterranean bonuses should not give additional height. It should be part of the aesthetics as to the compatibility of the area?
I think that there are already certain areas that are deemed that they must be Mediterranean. You can't touch those.
But you're saying you shouldn't have additional height.
Well, what I'm saying is that sometimes it's counterintuitive, to the particular style, and after a certain height, you kind of lose the perspective of the detailing and the style to begin with.
Then should that detail maybe be at a lower level? So that at the height that it's at, you don't visibly see it?
We had on the committee, we had very healthy discussions about that, about providing, areas that are more pedestrian friendly, areas that are more conducive to the scale of the pedestrian. It's a quality issue there, and you could provide certain bonuses for that. But in my opinion, though, the reason I said specifically that it's run its course is there are so many buildings right now that are being built that it's very difficult to justify that they even come close to that. But they're still being given, the bonuses, especially, the high bonus.
But then I would think then you have to look at, unfortunately, doing again a zoning code rewrite, because that's something that you got to correct within the code, as opposed to talking about how to arbitrarily or not arbitrarily determine it.
Right. I just think that this proposal before us today, in my opinion, doesn't get to any place as far as improvement, but that I think that taking a 40,000-foot view of everything, you should be looking at the possibility of providing in certain areas in the city, certain bonuses to be able to provide a certain quality that you normally would not provide. But at the same time, I think that tagging that bonus on a style, only one style, I think is wrong. I think it should be different. That's my personal opinion.
I mean, we're fortunate because we have 4 distinguished architects that are sitting on this panel. And it's good. I mean, I'd like to hear,
That you?
Julio, what's your thoughts on that?
I am not sure if the Mediterranean architectural bonus has resulted on a positive, on a positive environment for the city. I mean, when you look at, not all, some of the buildings that have been built, which are supposedly Mediterranean, they're not necessarily the highest quality of architecture. So I don't know how we solve that. And I think there is also the possibility that you can have very good or great architecture that's not Mediterranean. So why are we penalizing the architects or the clients who want to build a facility that is not Mediterranean, but they're being forced to go the Mediterranean route because that's the only way they can get the bonuses? So there's a dichotomy there which I have difficulties with.
Okay. Javier, what's your feeling on that? Sorry.
No, that's good.
I understand the issue with regards to the descriptive words that we're using, but I think that part of that is answered by the exhibit that you have up behind you right now, where you get specific examples as to what you're talking about with regards to vertical hierarchy, emphasis, and whatnot. So I think that answers a lot of those questions by just citing the examples and the analytical drawings that are provided. And again, these are analytical drawings of examples. I don't think that the examples are meant to be a definitive list of examples. There are lots of other Mediterranean buildings. And honestly, the proportioning and the emphasis and the vertical hierarchy are just as relevant in modern architecture as they are in classic or a Mediterranean revival or neoclassical or Beaux-Arts or whatever style you want to analyze. The same rules apply. And then the abstraction of those rules in the more modern language can be some really very beautiful buildings that don't necessarily fall within that line. So I see your point. I think what the problem is that we defined early on that Mediterranean being the nadir of beauty, when it isn't necessarily the nadir of beauty. This is a city which has its history in Mediterranean revival kind of architecture with the work of Mr. Pace and Mr. Fink and others, and the initial development work that was done, the Ponce building, the Ponce entrance building, all the bits of architecture which were part of the original development of the city. But it also included, the Norman village, the French village, the Chinese village. So it all done in very respectful but derivative versions of the original styles of the architecture where they were being selected. The Chinese village had Chinese architectural elements in them, moon gates, slope curved roof pitches, and the Norman villages have their small windows and large proportion of wall versus window, and their detailing with regards to the simplicity of their eaves into the roofs, and very much evocative. And again, the word is evocative of the style because there's no replicant or replicated design that I don't think that I think the code is looking for. But with regards to Mediterranean bonus, we decided early on that it should be Mediterranean. It was the design style for the city and the one that we would want to promote. And if what we're doing is then promoting a cartoon re-realization of that Mediterranean revitalization. I think that's what Julio is talking about. And what is a point of growing objection. Originally, it was brought out to help pay for the increase in the detailing by awarding greater development rights to a slightly larger building, or in some cases a much larger building, to be able to compensate for that extra cost. And what we're saying is that we're not seeing the value of that extra cost or that extra development being expressed in the quality of the work that's being presented as Mediterranean bonus-worthy architecture. And so, for example, the level and quality of the finishes on the ground floors as they relate to the people when you touch them, when the people walk up to them. And a classic example is the Biltmore, where we have a fairly rich band of architecture at the low level and on the small scale buildings which surround it. But then you have the same classical architectural problem that Chicago faced in the starting of the high rises, where we develop buildings as almost colonnades where the windows become the void spaces between the piers of the column, and then we put a dressed roof on it and articulated eaves and whatnot to then tie it all back together. And that's a legitimate way of looking at it. But the quality of the architecture in some cases is such that it's reading much more as a pastiche than it is a real architectural composition. And that's really, and how do you gauge that? How do you qualify that? Well, the city set up a board specifically of peer architects to review, to be able to challenge the person presenting to do his best work. And in some cases, that's a very helpful situation, but not always. And sometimes it leads to better architecture, but not always. And sometimes it just is, okay, we got to get this thing approved, and let's make sure we get the checkoffs right, and we get things built that we then look at and wonder and scratch our head, how did that get built? But I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to give you an example of the value of the Board of Architects. During COVID, there was a couple of projects that went through and didn't go through the Board of Architects, and I can find them because I can see that the quality of the design was really bad. And so that at least you meet a minimum requirement. And I think what this Mediterranean bonus and this language is trying to do is to establish what that minimum requirement is. And whereas we were dealing with people with different levels of talent, and somebody's best is not as good as somebody's mediocre, and somebody's mediocre is not as good as somebody else's best, it's a very subjective situation. I think that the documents that you presented with regards to the examples are fairly clear in their analysis and in their presentation, and it's a good basis from which to judge and to create, because it does give you the toolbox of things that the board should be looking at. And I think that with the forms and as they're given, I think that we have made a great stride in helping to define a better architectural model to develop. So I think it's fine. I don't see it necessarily as a problem.
Robert?
I respectfully disagree with some of the comments I've heard made, because in today's environment, some of the example you gave would not be able to be done today. You mentioned the Chinese village and all, and you're not going to be able to do that and get the bonus. And by the way, example, I kind of like the diversity that was done at the time it was done. I think that Julio and I think that Felix mentioned it. In order to get good architecture, a lot of what's being mandated to get to discourage an architect to do that. I think we could use some examples that buildings that have spent a lot of money, beautiful buildings in materials that is being utilized. But when you look at the articulation, the massiveness that is of the projects, to me, are not really the quality of standard they deserve to do that. And I'm gonna use one, which is on US 1, or two on US 1, okay? Across from my office. Well, that project is very massive. It got all the little gingerbread details. But at the end of the day, it's not a good project. Look at the mass, look at the scale, look at everything on that project. But if you look at it, it probably went on a prescriptive basis what this is asking for. And I think that's the problem. And I don't want, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you got to give me more example of exactly what you need to do to get there. I think that we are discouraging, and I think Julio was probably alluding, to good, better architecture. There was a comment by a colleague of ours in the last meeting here that I found it, and I didn't make a mention anything last time, I found it very troublesome, that we should be trying to duplicate 1920s building, okay? Doesn't mean that a 1920 building is what we should be doing today. To me, that's not the right approach, and I think we got to look at differently. I am not in favor. I'm a vote to do it because this is going in that direction. I'm not in favor of the Mediterranean design improvement that is being proposed. We sat on that blue ribbon panel, and Felix will remember that I was a lot of times trying to be able to be more, have a little bit more openness into that, code or whatever we were doing at the time. I think that we got to be a little bit more clear, because to me, that one particular item is very subjective. I could bring something in that any of the four of us or any of the architects that we have, and it could be evaluated, viewed differently. And that's my concern. What's good for one has to be good for the other. It cannot be very subjective. And that's my concern. But
Before we continue, do we have any speakers for this item, Jill?
No.
On either platform? No. Okay, so let me go ahead and close it for public comment at this time. Chip, would you like to comment on this?
Well, obviously, I'm not an architect, but I just have some basic questions to the architect. When you say a good building, are you saying functionally good or aesthetically good, or both?
Ideally, both.
You have to do both.
Okay. So when we look at our 12 categories, which I have no idea why you chose 6 as opposed to 8 or opposed to 9, why 6 was the number.
It's because that's what they're in the code right now.
It's
So right
what?
now we have 12 criteria and the level 2
So you
bonus.
just split it in half, 6 and...
No, it's just what's there
She's
right
following
now. Right
the
now
code.
is 6 or 12.
I know,
and
I'm
8 or
wondering
12.
where that came from, though.
I haven't researched
Why
that.
6? Why not 8 or 5 or 7?
Because you got two levels.
I get that.
You could get, and that as far as I remember, it's been like that for.
I know. But are some more important than others? Or some aesthetic and
Well,
some
it's
functional?
so you don't want the same building to come out every single med bonus. You want to have some flexibility. Maybe you want to have arcade. Maybe you don't want to have an arcade. Maybe
No,
you
I
wanna
get
do-
it, but are some of those functional elements and were looked at as being functional, and some of those were looked at as being aesthetic?
Mr. Chairman, I can answer that.
Yeah, I would love-
I
'cause
was
I-
there when it happened.
Okay.
Okay.
So the point is that.
And that's Felix without dating yourself, right?
Well, when you talked about the showroom on Ponce, it kind of dated him, I guess.
Yeah. So the way that this was created was that, unfortunately, they try to put a point system on.
Right.
And, so check, that kind of thing, which is, of course, that's the last thing you want to do when it comes to trying to use creativity, but then you could only use the crayons in the box. And then it became obtuse because they started putting in bicycle racks.
Right.
And they started putting in these irrelevant things that simply should be required, but through another part of the code has nothing to do whether it's Mediterranean or, it's not a Mediterranean Schwinn bicycle rack. And then it continued being obtuse like that. And then you really didn't get into the meat of it until you got to the second level. So you basically took the first level, and it was a gimme. And then you had the second level. It's very, very disheartening. So, and then just keep in mind that the reason that the Blue Ribbon Committee was created was because of what had been built and the examples of what had been given bonuses that were not worthy. And so, to answer your question, it was they started off this way, and then they started throwing things in there.
Right.
And the original one, which was much better, started talking about creating things at the pedestrian level, which had to do with fountains and providing plazas and providing these things, where good architects would do that automatically because they knew that the pedestrian was all important. So this has morphed into, we keep changing it and changing and changing it. And when I see the chronology that we see in that bar chart with all the different changes, it really is, it doesn't look like anything. And then after having the Blue Ribbon Committee implementing this now, or trying to implement this now, it's like, take a couple steps back and really consider what you really want to do as far as the quality of architecture in the city.
So would you rather have a functional building or an aesthetically looking building? Now, I can tell you as an untrained eye on an architect, when I look at a building, I don't look at the functionality of it. I look at, hey, this is a really good looking building and I like it.
Well, normally,
I mean, I think most people do, don't you? I mean,
yeah, but the thing is that none of us here are going to be designing, just the elevation.
Yeah, I know.
You're going to be looking at the site. You're going to be looking at the floor. You're going to be looking at the overall height of the massing. You're going to be looking at all these elements. So at the end of the day, then, what it looks like, it gets to that point, and the Board of Architects can recognize it and be able to evaluate and provide opinions that are valuable to the architect before them.
okay, so my last comment. If compatibility seems to be a driving issue,
That compatibility is a driving issue, Chip, when you're looking at, the surroundings.
right, the aesthetics,
And
basically.
but it's also the surroundings. If you have, for example, you have Merrick Plaza, which, Julio was a major designer on this. And if you have now a building next to it, you don't necessarily want to replicate what Julio did there.
Right.
But you would want to then be able to take certain elements and add to it where it becomes part of the fabric of that area.
So it complements
And
it.
it complements it, and it's compatible with it.
Okay, so, and that's both on form and function and aesthetics, right? I mean.
That's correct.
Okay, so why wouldn't this code then have certain points of bonuses based on compatibility in one section and function in other sections?
Compatibility is not addressed in that, in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
And
Well, that seems like a key ingredient.
Of course, and that is when I personally stood right there and I was, basically told that, well, define compatibility. It's,
I get it. Okay, thank you.
you bet.
Well, I'm just a resident. But I'll tell you from a resident's point of view, I mean, for years, I've gone to Board of Architects meetings, I've gone to a lot of meetings. And probably the number one issue that residents have is this idea of a bonus. They say, what do you mean a bonus for Mediterranean? That should be up to the Board of Architects to decide about compatibility and context. I live in a 1950s area in Coral Gables, nondescript houses, nondescript. It's not Mediterranean, Old Spanish, nothing. To shoehorn a Mediterranean into that probably would be incompatible. So why have bonuses to begin with? Just like these gentlemen are saying, just let's have good architecture, but make sure it is compatible with the neighborhood. But I see no reason to keep this bonus thing going. As you said, it's run its course. And I can tell you that when my neighbors look at the Zuby building and say that is Mediterranean, so even with guidelines and guardrails, even within the old code, who decided that was Mediterranean and passed it? So where are the guardrails here? I mean, it's just another bunch of suggestions, and it's going to be a subjective decision anyway. You know, it's all about subjectivity here. And some of this in the past has been outright abuse, taking advantage of certain architects on that board to get the okays, okay? So the residents do not trust this Mediterranean bonus as far as you can throw it. So my suggestion would be that we have a recommendation, as opposed to voting on any of this, have a recommendation back to the, I guess, the commissioner who is suggesting this, that maybe the discussion should be at the level of eliminating the Mediterranean bonus altogether.
Just point of order.
Yes.
When the Subi building was built, it was not Mediterranean. The way the code was written at that time was Mediterranean-inspired architecture. And that was eliminated after that building was completed. And the idea was that you have the tower, and you have the break in the facade, and you have the arcade on the ground floor. But it was never passed as an architectural project. It was Mediterranean-inspired was the word at that
Okay.
time in the code.
All right, well, thank you for that insight, but I see no Mediterranean inspiration in that building. It was a subjective vote to give them the bonus.
I have to talk to the architect board at that time.
Well, I know, Glenn Pratt, in fact, Glenn Pratt one time said, looking at, I was at a Board of Architects meeting, is looking at what was before him as a Mediterranean feature, railings that were supposed to be balconies. And he said, those are paste up balconies. You know, I mean, even he criticized something like that, and that was a whole lot more Mediterranean than what he designed. I mean, he designed the Zuby building. There's nothing inspirational Mediterranean in that building at all. And if there is, please tell me what it is. But, I mean, this is the point of contention that residents have. They look at projects like that, whether it be part of a bonus or it's inspired or whatever, and they're saying, this isn't one bit Mediterranean. And you know, Robert brought up some buildings on US 1, the Lifetime building. I'm sure you're referring to the Lifetime building. Come on. You know, so we residents might not have your credentials, but we've got a good set of eyes. We can figure it out on our own. And what's been passed under a Mediterranean bonus a lot of times has nothing to do with Mediterranean architecture. So again, I'll reiterate, I think this board should recommend to the commissioner who brought this up to have a real serious discussion about eliminating the Mediterranean bonus, period.
For me, I'm here to analyze what was brought before us, which is how to look at giving Mediterranean bonuses. If there are ideas or wishes of residents or individuals that want to do away with the Mediterranean bonus, I think that's a different discussion, and that's something that has to be brought up to rewrite the zoning code, not as a discussion today. There could be a recommendation, as Sue says, if that comes about from this board. You know, obviously that's based on a recommendation and a second and a vote. To me, what I'm looking at is what was presented, and is that sufficient or not to change the way Mediterranean bonuses are given? And that's why I actually asked the four architects to comment on it, because to me, it's very subjective, the way it's presented, number one. Number two, personally, I like the idea of the Mediterranean being more on the ground level, as Felix has stated, than way up where you don't see it or use it. But I don't see the discussion taking place at this point to do away with a Mediterranean bonus. and that's not what the city staff is bringing before us. What is it that you're looking from this board?
Well, again, so this was reviewed and kind of workshopped with the Board of Architects. They're looking for more teeth to review these projects. Right now, they have a lot of criteria that's in the med bonus that's already required underneath the existing zoning. So they are looking for more, strengthen their criteria to be able to analyze these buildings. And right now, they don't have that. So they agree that there are some buildings that are out there that they probably wouldn't have liked to give med bonus to, or maybe they weren't on the board at the time and they don't agree that it looks like it's Mediterranean. But they only have much to go with. They have what's in the code right now, which has bike racks and
When the Board of Architects looks at the level 1, is it a full panel that looks at a
Yes.
level 1?
always, yes.
So whether it's level 1 or
Basically,
level 2?
any new construction is a full panel.
Okay,
But definitely, anytime they're looking at for med bonus, it's always a full panel.
okay.
Mr. Chair, I do have to take issue with something that you just said.
What's that?
You said, well, if a resident doesn't want the med bonus, let them
No, I said.
do it
that's
on their
not-
own.
That's not
Well,
exactly what I said.
You know, my understanding, this is a quasi-judicial board. This is where those suggestions should come from. This is what we should be doing.
So just one point clarification, this item is not a quasi-judicial item because this is a proposed amendment to the zoning code. So this is a legislative item, just for clarification.
Right, and I'm just saying, it's a quasi-judicial board. I didn't say it was an
Certainly.
item that was
Certainly, yes.
quasi-judicial. But if this board has the weight it's supposed to have, we should be making these kinds of recommendations, not just voting up or down on a project here and there. I mean, we haven't even addressed issues like the Live Local Act that we've brought up a number of times. That's my understanding of what this board should be doing. We have professionals on the board. We have amateurs on the board with good sets of eyes. We should be bringing this up for suggestions to the commission, not just up or down votes on this project or that project, but the real issues that matter to the residents.
Well, the way I see it, there's 7 members, and each one has their own opinion. So if one member feels a certain way, that's why I said if the recommendation wants to be made and then seconded and voted upon, then that's a vote. But that's not what I see that has come before us.
Okay, but we are allowed
Let
to.
me ask you a question.
Yes.
Would you like to make a recommendation?
I would love to make a recommendation, and I'm assuming this is in the form of a motion.
Yes.
I'd like to present a motion to make a suggestion to the entire commission to eliminate the Mediterranean bonus.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll make a second for discussion.
So you have a second to eliminate Mediterranean bonus. And then we'll get into discussion.
Correct.
Thank you. Go ahead, Felix. Proceed.
Okay, so I think you clearly said that what's before us really is the Mediterranean, adjustments to the Mediterranean bonus ordinance. So I think we would do one of two things, clearly, is to A, defer it with the discussion and the transcripts going to the commission, or B, voted up or down, the suggestions that are there, that I feel totally uncomfortable with. So what I would like to do is either A, defer it, or vote it up or down. But I think that the message, I think, is clear that the bonuses themselves and what they're given for has been a big subject of the discussion this evening.
Understood. Right now, we have a motion and we have a second. What I'd like to do first, is there any other further discussion before I call for a roll on it? No? Call the roll, please.
Sir Pavlinsky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Salman,
No.
Chip Withers,
No.
Robert Behar,
No.
Julio Gabriel,
No,
no,
no.
Mr.
Davey
Chairman,
Eisenstadt.
No. Yes,
I'm sorry,
Felix.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be able.
So that motion fails,
Correct.
to be clear for the record.
I'd like to make a motion to defer this item with the specific in discussion being referred to the commissioners, so they understand exactly what was discussed and why it was discussed, as far as the Mediterranean bonuses, et cetera.
But they read the minutes.
Correct.
And the transcript
Correct.
either way. What you're saying, just so I'm clear,
To
is
be
that
fair
you
to-
don't want to have any further discussion or for this item
No,
with our board at this point
Right.
to go forward.
right. The way
Want
that
to
it's
defer it with the language that's there now.
correct. I think it would not be the tools that the Board of Architects is looking for. I think that the deferral would give staff more time to be able to do something different and better.
But you don't want to give any recommendation to the Board of Architects. You don't want to give any further tools that they should consider. You just want to go ahead and say it should go directly to the commission based on the discussion.
No,
we've
I think
had
it
at
should
this
come
board.
back here with a deferral.
But to the commission first. In other words, normally we would send this back to the Board of Architects. Am I incorrect in that? That what we're doing here is?
I mean, for this item, it makes sense because this is the Board of Architects kind of criteria that they look at every week.
That's what
So,
I'm,
It's a little
so
unusual.
the general process for a text amendment is you all, it's gone through the staff process. There's been, it's like Ms. Garcia said, it's been workshopped with Board of Architects. And so now there is a proposed ordinance that you are considering today. And generally, the commission or the commissioner who's sponsoring this would want a recommendation from this board so that it can go to commission on first reading with a recommendation from this board.
so
Recommendation, yes or no?
if it's deferred, as the way,
Deferral means it's gonna, that you would like it to come back to this board.
To
That's
the
what a
planning
deferral
board.
would is.
Correct.
but for the commission to review our records first, is that?
No.
No, there's a
Stops
different,
here, and it goes back to the staff to reevaluate
That's-
based on the comments we've been giving her,
Okay,
which
that's
we've
what I
given her
misunderstood.
plenty few,
Yeah,
all right?
no, that's what I misunderstood. I thought you wanted to defer so it goes straight to the commission.
no. It's
thank
to
you.
give staff the opportunity to take the comments that were made by the board to be able to refine, to redo, et cetera.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes.
And so just to be clear though, if there is a motion to defer by this board, staff or a commissioner can request that it still be put on before the commission, even without a recommendation from this board, just so that's clear.
Understood.
Let me be clear then with the motion. The motion would be to defer and give staff the opportunity to provide a much more comprehensive and more specific document to come back to the planning board.
Understood. I'm just saying it's still within the commission's prerogative if a commissioner wants to.
That's
Have it
fine,
heard on
but
first reading.
I think this way the motion has
Understood.
teeth to it.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Chip, second?
For discussion,
Any discussion?
Yeah.
I have discussion.
Yes, sir.
You stated that you were concerned that there was nothing having to do with context and with appropriateness with regards to context as one of the criteria. Is that something you would want to add? Because this is your time to do it.
Well, and I think it was specific, and I think that the context is a key element for the Board of Architects to review, which includes also the massing, as what the
The
example.
massing's in there.
I'm sorry?
Massing is in there.
No, the massing is in it, but it's truly breathtaking because the Board of Architects really has been informed, and I have been a witness to it, where they've been informed that, you can't get into the planning, you can't get into the massing, you can't get into the compatibility.
Oh, sure you can.
You and I know that.
Sure you can.
But when you have someone giving them an opinion, on a sidebar saying you can't do that, and then you end up with buildings like the one on US 1.
You can set proportions for difference in elevations.
I'm not disagreeing.
And that could be a very simple mathematical formula. If your neighbor is one story, you can't do more than two next to it.
Well, I think
Okay,
staff,
and there's lots of ways that we can be very specific as to context.
and I
If
think,
you're an axial point of view, of a building within a separate context. You have to have some sort of compatibility within the context of which you're creating a building within that axial view.
I feel
There's
comfortable that
lots of
staff-
very specific things that we can add into this code with regards to compatibility. And I think that what we need to do is give them the information and the tools of what we're going to be looking for an approval. Isn't that correct?
I think this is
Okay, then that's
exactly.
what you want. So let's give them that kind of specific direction, that we want to have
In the
compatibility.
prerequisites table, there's something called context analysis, which came from the Board of Architects. They're looking for this because they feel like people go and they present their building and they have no context what's around them. So that is to propose the massing scale and height to be compatible with adjacent buildings.
Right.
And analysis of the context shall be illustrated to show the compatibility of the proposed building and maintain the character of existing surrounding area.
That's not true, because when you submit to the Board of Architects, you have to present the buildings which surround your building as part of your presentation.
Yes, but their concern was that sometimes the images are picking and choosing what's around there, and they didn't feel like there was enough analysis being done.
Let me throw something at you, and I remember when we sat on the Blue Ribbon Committee, if you have a site, let's say it's adjacent to the old Republic National Bank building, I forget whatever the name of the building today on the Circle, which is a building that Julio with Mitch Alvarez had done, and you referred to a very good, which I personally think is a very beautiful building, and that's my opinion.
And it's Mediterranean inspired, it's not Mediterranean.
But today, when you look at those guidelines, we'll not be able to qualify for the inspiration part or so that's compatibility. Well, the buildings can be right next to that site, and how do you address that?
Well, this again, when you use the word compatibility or the word of massing, you have to provide certain examples. And my problem right now with the way that what is before us tonight is that the word may be there once or twice, each one, but there isn't a better definition. There isn't, it's not explained in a better way, like the example you just gave. And the issue is also that on the compatibility, sometimes it also depends on the context of the area. And when you're designing it, giving that tool to the Board of Architects gives them the ability to do a better job what they're looking for.
But for Felix, look, for example, and you're right, and the Board of Architects, but that building, if you look at, it's an office building, and that building has large opening windows. And I'm saying this was, so that is a feature, a component of that design that is critically important to make that successful. Today, in order to receive those bonuses, the example that I'm seeing, windows have to be small windows. So how do you, that's to me, it's an oxymoron,
And again, this is what is wrong with the code today. I would give the bonuses to that building, and I would not have given the same bonuses simply because they went overboard on the detailing on the plaza. Because the massing is wrong. Everybody in this room knows that the massing was wrong. The same as the building, that cube on US 1. The same thing. The massing is wrong. We all understand that. And that's where the compatibility, the contextual, all these different things go to. And the other thing is, when you are next to a historic building, the viewport is very important for that historic building, where you're not obstructing it or minimizing it or destroying it, which is the 2901 building on Ponce, which is the historic building that they couldn't touch. But instead of paying homage to it, they basically just ignored it. So this is complicated. This was part of what the Blue Ribbon Committee discussed, as you remember. We never got to that point. We got cut off at a certain point, but this doesn't continue or do anything to finish that particular job, in my opinion.
We have a motion right now for deferring
In a second.
and a second. Any other discussion?
I just have a question to the architects. The number that was thrown around to me in order to encourage Mediterranean was an additional cost of 25 to 30% to build that building originally,
Back in the day.
back in the day. Is it anything close to that now, or would it, with the new,
No,
I don't know.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I could answer that.
I'm just curious to know.
Back in the day, nobody was doing that. In fact, most of the times that they were doing were a lot of glass boxes, a lot of this, a lot of that. And then until, for example, again, Julio worked on the bank building, and then did the beautiful job behind on the alley for the colonnade. And then, it was different because the scale was different. So the cost was there, but it wasn't there. It was less. So the smaller the building, the more but over time, with technology and means and methods today, there's no way you could justify that it's a 35% increase. It'll be more, but more compared to what? And will that what be approved by the Board of Architects? And that's also a part of the formula.
Any other questions? No? Jill, call the roll, please.
Before we
One second, Jill.
define the motion again?
To defer, to give staff the ability to come back before us, Julio.
Thank you. Jill?
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Salman,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
Zuka Valensky,
No.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes.
Thank you.
So you have your direction.
Some.
Sorry, my only comment.
Not a lot.
Your fault.
Let me ask the board, should we continue on number 4 and 5 so Robert can stay?
Now, look, I think I'll go outside. I appreciate it, but in fairness to the applicant, I'll sit out for a little while.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to get a consensus. Thank you.
He also gets to go to the bathroom.
Madam City Attorney, if you please read, let the record state that Robert Behar has left the dais.
Elvis has left the
Thank
building.
you.
Elvis has left the door. Thank you.
So E1 is a resolution of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, approving conditional use review of a site plan pursuant to Zoning Code Article 14 process, Section 14-203, conditional uses for proposed townhouse development referred to as The George on the property legally described as lots 29 through 41, Block 10, Coral Gables, Biltmore Section, Coral Gables, Florida, including required conditions, providing for repeated provisions, severability clause, and an effective date. E2 is a resolution of the City Commission of Coral Gables approving the tentative plat entitled The George pursuant to Zoning Code Article 14, process section 14-210, platting subdivision being a replat of 36,634 square feet into 13 platted lots for 13 residential townhouses on property assigned multifamily 4 district zoning. The property legally described as lots 29 through 41, Block 10, Coral Gables, Biltmore Section, Coral Gables, Florida, providing for repeated provisions, severability clause, and an effective date.
So E1 and E2 will look together but have separate votes on them.
Correct.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Mario Garcia Serra with offices at 600 Brickell Avenue. Here this evening representing the George LLC, the applicant and owner of the assemblage of property located at 711 to 741 Valencia Avenue. I'm accompanied this evening by Alirio Torrealba, the principal of MG Developer, the parent company of the George LLC, my client, as well as Jenny Ducret and Jose Mata from MG Developer, and our project architects, Maria de la Guardia and Keegan Marshall. So as I mentioned already, the George LLC is a subsidiary of MG Developer, which is one of this city's most successful and recognized developers. Just in the vicinity of this site, as is indicated on the aerial photo, they have built 4 other projects: Biltmore Park, Althea Row, Beatrice Row, and Biltmore Row. All of these projects have been very well received and recognized for their architecture and sensitive scale. The project under review tonight, and Keegan's going to show you a few more images of each of those projects. The project under review tonight, the George, named in honor of our city founder, who is literally looking upon us this evening from behind you, continues that great tradition of those other projects. It is a 13-unit, 3-story townhome incorporating the best of Coral Gables architecture. In a demonstration of how this developer thinks differently. Even though this property has one of the more intense zoning designations in the city, which is MF4, the project comes nowhere close to realizing or maximizing that development potential. Where 13 stories is permitted, this project is proposing 3 stories. Where 50 condo units are permitted, this project is proposing 13 townhomes. Where an FAR of 2.5 is possible, this project is at an FAR of 1.5. Through the good work of my client and others, this area of the city has indeed transformed itself in a very positive direction, and this is the next step in that evolution. This project complies 100% with its existing zoning regulations, and we are only requesting site plan review and a replat of the property. We had 2 neighbor meetings, one before the Board of Architects and one before this Planning and Zoning Board meeting, both of them very well attended, where we received very positive feedback on the project from the neighboring residents. With that said, I'll hand it over to Keegan and Maria now to walk you through the project.
Welcome.
Good evening, Maria de la Guardia and Keegan Marshall from DLGV Architects and Urbanists.
Could you state your address also for the record, please?
224 Valencia Avenue in Coral Gables. In the tradition of its namesake, George Merrick, the George emerges as a landmark development on Valencia Avenue, exemplifying luxury townhouse living while deeply respecting the architectural ethos of Coral Gables. This ensemble of 13 fee-simple luxury townhouses meticulously planned by MG Developer is a homage to the architecture of historic Coral Gables. The George's design philosophy and execution reflect a conscientious approach to urban development, prioritizing spacious, luxurious living environments within a harmonious community setting. Coral Gables is a city celebrated for its desire for high architectural standard, inspired by its beautiful historic architecture. In keeping with these standards, the George admirably showcases a preference for quality and community integration over maximizing development potential. And I'm going to repeat some of the numbers that Mario shared with us. The decision to construct only 13 fee-simple townhouses on a site zone MF4 is a testament to MG Developers' commitment to enhancing the residential quality and aesthetic value of Biltmore Square. The Coral Gables zoning code for MF4 district allows 50 units, yet 13 are being proposed. It allows 2.0 FAR, yet 1.5 is being proposed. It allows 150 feet height, yet 42.5 feet is being proposed. It allows a net floor area of 73,000 square feet, yet 55,000 is being proposed. Finally, although 26 parking spaces are required, the project proposes to double that with 52 parking spaces. With a proposed lower floor area ratio and modest building height, the George is poised to blend seamlessly into the existing urban landscape, further enriching the neighborhood's architectural diversity. Drawing inspiration from iconic structures such as the Coral Gables City Hall by Phineas Pace and James Knox Taylor's historic Old Federal Building, the George seeks to imbue its design with a sense of historical continuity and architectural elegance. These influences manifest in the project's facade, weaving the 2-story order including the domestic third floor with the rusticated base. The facade is grand, yet the base presents a relatable scale to the pedestrian. This architectural approach not only pays homage to the city's heritage, but also promotes a pedestrian-friendly streetscape that enriches the community's public realm. The design process for the George involved a thoughtful study of classic townhouse design to strike a balance between the individual character and the collective harmony. This research informed the facade layout and composition, drawing cues from the cohesive architectural expressions in the Upper East Side and Boston Back Bay, and the unified elegance of the collective whole at the Circus in Bath, England. The individual distinction and the architectural continuity coalesce to form a vibrant urban tapestry. The George introduces a collection of 3-story townhouses, each with balconies and terraces in 4 four-bedroom configurations. The inclusion of an elevated second-floor principal living space reflects a contemporary interpretation of the traditional piano nobile concept, enhancing resident privacy while fostering engagement with the outdoor environment. The individual 4-car garages are accessible only from the alley, thus not disrupting the streetscape. This design philosophy extends to the careful selection of materials. Can we go to the, this design philosophy extends to the careful selection of materials and architectural details, where each element was chosen to evoke the Mediterranean heritage of Coral Gables. The building has a first-floor cast stone rusticated base with mahogany windows and doors in arches that march down Valencia. The second floor is punctuated by 3 9-foot-tall French doors opening to a balcony with finely designed geometric metal railings. The second and third floors are finished in stucco with precast architectural accents. The 3-story building is capped with a precast cornice that has been proportioned to the building height. The flat clay tile represents the ballast of the materials on the facade. Moreover, the George's contribution to the streetscape of Valencia Avenue through thoughtful urban planning and street planning underscores its commitment to community enhancement. The proposed 6-foot sidewalk and 12-foot parkway improvements, accompanied by the strategic placement of the street trees, parking, and lighting, are designed to foster a welcoming and vibrant pedestrian experience in line with the character of adjacent townhouse developments by the same team. Urbanistically, the George is charged with the responsibility of transitioning from multifamily high density to single-family residence. So although we could have built 150 feet in height in 13 stories, which is what Villa Valencia is a block away. So we could have done pretty much Villa Valencia on this site. We're proposing 42 feet and 3 stories and 13 units instead of 50. As this project comes before the Planning and Zoning Board, it does so with the commitment of the design and development team renowned for its contribution to award-winning projects within the community. The George presents not just a continuity of this legacy of excellence, but also in not maximizing development and opportunity to contribute a new chapter to the architectural narrative of Coral Gables with a design that respects its past while representing the needs of modern living. The George stands as a beacon of thoughtful, community-oriented development, ready to enrich the Biltmore Square for generations to come.
Well, thank you very much, Maria. We spent most of the time talking about the site plan. We are requesting a replat of the property too. If you can maybe show there you go, the tentative plat, pretty straightforward. Basically replatting the lots on the site. So it's going to be 13 lots, a lot corresponding to each townhome. So they can be conveyed in fee simple. There, of course, will be a master covenant governing the whole property just so that it's sort of managed in a unified fashion.
So no association for each each home?
No, it's not going to be a condominium. It's going to be a property that's subject to a master covenant that everybody has to participate in, and sort of governs what how common areas are maintained and party wall issues and stuff like that.
Is there an authority for that?
What do you mean?
I mean, is there a group that'll be charged with the enforcement of that?
All right.
Can you speak into the microphone for the court reporter, please?
So in these townhouses, there's a property owners association, and the exterior of the building is heavily codified in terms of what can be done and what can't be done. And then there's typically sort of a management team that takes care of the entire perimeter. So everything is the same and
So it's
consistent.
like a condominium somewhere, it's not a condominium.
But it's not a condominium.
Just
so
an
it's
association, but they do collect fees?
minimal, like $200 a month kind of thing.
Do they have the right to cite one of the individual owners? Say he doesn't want to paint his building.
They usually mechanisms in place so that if one person isn't, doing what they have to do, the other ones can pay and lien the one who hasn't paid and be able to ultimately collect.
Sounds like a mess.
It ends up being an association form of structure, but it's not a condominium.
Continue, please.
No, I think that's it for our main presentation.
What's the width of those lots,
The width of the lots?
the ones you're proposing for the replat?
So
I can't read it from here.
the internal lots are 24/6. The end lots, because there's setbacks.
Right.
And the unit is exactly the same, is 29/6. The property is not completely rectangular, so.
No, it's,
So there's, but basically, internal lots are 24/6.
Okay.
That's the extent of our presentation. We'll reserve time for questions, of course, or rebuttal if necessary.
Thank you.
You want public?
Sorry?
Public?
No, staff, city is going to make their presentation first.
Good evening. Jennifer Garcia, planning official. So location, as you know, is on Valencia between Cardena and Anderson Road. It's just to the south of what's known as David Williams Hotel, next to Beatrice Row, across the street from Biltmore Park, and what's under construction right now is 701 Valencia. The land use right now is multifamily high density, and the zoning is MF4. There's two requests, the site plan, which is required because they're more than 29 square feet, and then a tentative plat. So the existing lot area is more or less 36,000 square feet. There's no change in zoning, no change in land use. The FAR is 1.51. The maximum would be 2.0. Maximum height is 43.5, 33 and a half feet, and 13 units. They're providing 26.4% open space, so the requirement is 25%. And their over parking, the requirement would be 26 spaces total, and they're parking 52, which is 4 spaces per unit. So the site plan, the parking is in the rear, access from the alley. There's an alley on the rear as well as on the side. All the entrances, there's no additional curb cuts being proposed on the sidewalk. These are renderings of what it would look like. And a tentative plat is, like they said, it's 13 individual lots. The lots on either side are a little bit wider, given the setbacks that are required. So DRC reviewed this in December. It went to Board of Architects in April, and here we are for planning and zoning. They'll go to City Commission for the site plan by resolution to be determined when, and final plat would go to the county and come back for final plat approved by the City Commission in the coming months. So there were letters sent out to the property owners and current occupants within 1,000 feet of the project 3 times for 2 neighborhood meetings and tonight's meeting, as well as the property was posted twice for DRC and PCB. The website was posted twice as well. Newspaper advertisement was once, and 1 email was sent out last week. So the application does comply with findings of fact. It's part of your staff report they have before you, and there are conditions of approval. Those are located on the last few pages of your staff report. But the unique ones are to relocate the 6 mature live oak trees, for them to coordinate with Public Works on that, to pay for any loss of on-street parking, as well as any additional trees would be provided on a Valencia, Biltmore Court, Cardena, and Biltmore Way in the future, based on any funds collected from the canopy mitigation payments or funds that would be required in the future. And then also minimizing the construction dust. There's a concern for a neighbor on the north side of a lot of construction dust during demolition and during construction. So that's also a condition of approval. That's it.
Thank you. Jill, we have 2 emails that you circulated to us. Those are going to be entered for the record.
Yes.
Are there any other comments besides these 2 that you received via email?
No, those were the only 2.
Okay. As far as speakers in the chambers, what do we have? Anybody sign up?
No one replied to the comment. if they
No, no.
wanted to speak
Do
to
we
them.
have any speakers in the chambers?
No,
Do we have any on Zoom or telephone?
no.
Okay. So at this time, I'll go ahead and close it for public comment. Julio, will you start us, please?
You know, we spent a lot of time in the previous discussion about what is quality architecture and what is Mediterranean. And I think this is a perfect example of what quality architecture is, how it reacts to the street, to the massing, creating a new district. Actually, the developer and the architect should be commended that we have developed a brand-new village in that section of town with all the townhouses that have been built. The scale is right and everything is right. I think this is the best townhouse project that you have done, by the way. And I think it's a great project. And I would vote for it.
Thank you. Chip?
I just want to know how long it took you to come up with the name. I mean, and seriously, was it discussed, or did it just bang, or had it just? It's pretty. I don't think we never had the George. What comes next?
True.
I
You
guess,
think it should have happened already, but each of them have history behind them. You know,
I'm real curious
Maria
to know.
can tell you, Althea, Beatrice, each of
I
these.
know it has nothing to do with the application, but I'm just curious to know how you came up with that name.
We named one after his mother,
Right?
right? Althea Rowe. And there's a series that were named after female names, which is sometimes the case in townhouse
Right.
projects in England. And then we just wanted to break with sort of the row. And so we just came up with the George,
George.
and we coined it really fast.
I bet you did.
As soon as we came up with it.
I just tried to grab
it
the
was coined.
George.com and it's already been taken, so you know.
There's still the chip.
Ooh, yeah. So I hope they have elevators too. But I just have a question for staff on the parking. Are they actually taking more of the sidewalk into the right of way, or why?
No, so right now there's no curb cuts, there's no bump outs on that street except for one, I think, that's next to the alley. So
Okay.
part of the requirement of the zoning code is to provide street trees.
Okay.
So the standard is usually 2 spaces and a bump out, and then 2 spaces and a bump out, and so on.
So there's paid parking there now?
Right now, what do you mean? Right now there's
I mean,
asphalt
they're
up to
paying.
the
It
curb.
said they're paying for the parking spots.
Well, that's standard, right? So they're incorporating a little bit more bump outs than we would normally be okay with.
No, is there meters there now?
There are no mirrors there right now.
But
Residential
we're going to
parking
charge
only.
them as if there were meters there.
No, so in the city code, you're required to pay 43,000 some change.
But I know, I'm
Monica
assuming
here,
is
actually?
that because of lost
not here.
parking revenue?
Yes, there was
did
some-
if
why
there's
that
no, I guess
number?
my question is, if there's no parking there now, so we're not losing revenue now, why are we charging them for revenue that we're not enjoying right now? I'm just curious for the logic behind that.
The curb space. So
What?
the curb space. So there's some analysis before I was here that however much you're generating from a parking space, and yes, it's not metered, so technically, yes, you're not losing metered space, but you are losing that curb space to park more cars. Therefore, putting more demand on parking other parts of the area.
Are we charging there now?
We're not charging per hour on that spot. No.
So I can park there for free?
I think it's residential parking right now on
You
that.
need a
I
parking
could be,
permit there.
could be wrong.
Could I ask you to come up? Because that way it'll be on the record.
I'm just trying to figure out the logic behind it, that's all. And then we'll
So
discuss the
anytime you remove
merit.
a parking spot, whether it's metered or not metered, the city charges you for it because you're impacting the curb.
Except if you're in a residential neighborhood, then we don't charge for parking.
No,
right?
you'd still charge, like if you're in North Ponce where you have on-street parking that you're not paying a meter, if you remove parking, the city will charge you for removing that parking space. Residential, as far as single family, no, because it's swale, it's not a parking space.
So I'm not clear. Are we charging people if they want to park there now?
No. Right now, any of us could go park there right now and would not have to pay any sort of fee. It is a residential parking zone, so at certain times you have to have your decal indicating you're a resident, or another one that indicates you're a guest of a resident. But it's not being charged now, nor has it ever been in our living memory, in my living memory at least.
You can only park there if you have that decal. So therefore, you only can park there if you have a permit with the parking department.
But is that the whole day or only certain times?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure in that area.
Are they developing the curb?
Yes.
Okay.
If you want to go to the site plan, I can show you.
No, so there's no parking charge now. They're developing the curb. They're actually underbuilding what they can and enhancing the neighborhood, and we're charging them as if we could park there. Is that the logic?
I think Chip is asking, why do they have to pay into a fund for parking when there's no parking there?
Right now, there's accommodating cars that park there.
But they don't pay.
They pay a permit, I believe, a residential permit.
I think they do. pay
But the
residential
cars that are parked there now,
Are not actually
are
paying the
they going
city
to
every
lose the
hour.
ability to park?
I really wish Monica was here for this.
There will be a loss of parking, correct, Jennifer? There's going to be a
Yes.
loss of parking there.
There will be
That's
a
why
loss
it's
of parking.
triggering the payment to.
So I'm going to ask my question
parking.
again. Are people paying to park there? That's my very simple question. It's either a yes or a no.
Luckily, my client who's there every day advises it's a residential parking zone 24/7, and you do have to pay to get your permit or decal in order to park there.
Okay,
And
I
I
get
think
it.
she said
Okay,
it was
then that answers my
$50.
question.
Just the court reporter's not able to capture that.
I'll repeat it. So,
Okay.
in the space in front of this property, as well as across the street, it's a residential parking zone, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the resident needs to pay for a decal to put on the car, which I believe I was told was $50 a year.
$50
A year.
a year.
Yep.
And how many parking spots are there?
Right now, there are 15 parking spaces. They're providing
It's interesting.
8.
So wait a minute,
Providing
let me do
8.
the math here. So that's, I'm not that sharp this quick, okay? That's about $750 a year, right? We're getting in revenue? And how much are we charging for the parking?
So there's a one-time fee that a developer pays when they're impacting any parking on.
I get it. Just
Whether
what
it's
is that
metered
number?
or whether it's permit.
So that number is what?
43,000.
43 and some change.
42. So
4,200.
42,000.
Oh, 42. So we're basically paying them for 200 years of parking?
So
There is a reduction if you're losing the parking space because you're putting in a bulb out
I get
because
it.
the
I
streetscape
get- I
is required. There's
understand.
a
I'm
discount
just-
of 21. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm in favor of this, but I'm against charging them for the parking. I'm just telling you that's how I feel. I don't know how the rest of the board.
So that is,
If I can comment, that's a public street. That's public, right? That's a public street. Residents don't own that street. A resident. We all own that street. Is that correct?
Yes.
I own that
It's a
street.
right-of-way.
Any taxpayer owns that street. That's public property, correct?
It's a right-of-way, yes.
It's a right-of-way. It's public property.
Yes.
Why would we give away my right to park there to a developer?
so our code requires this parking replacement assessment, so that the city can then develop additional public parking elsewhere in the city.
Well, what happens
So
to the
that is
people
why
that
there
are
is a
now parking there?
$42,000 per space
I understand, but what happens to the people that are now parking there who are all of a sudden are not going to have their public parking spot?
There are other available parking areas.
So I think what's important to note is you're losing parking, but you're losing parking so that we can make the street more beautiful. You're losing parking so we can create bulb outs, so we can plant oak trees. Right now, in that stretch in front of the property, there's not a single street tree. It's on the north side of the street, so it gets blasted by the sun all day. So on the south side, at least, Biltmore Park gives a little bit of shade to the sidewalk, but on the north side, it just gets blasted, blasted, blasted. So we're losing parking, but not because it's because we want to put trees. And actually, we've put a lot of effort into studying what would be the best spacing between the trees in order to create a continuous tree canopy in order to protect the pedestrians. So all of this is not because we're going to benefit by eliminating parking. All of this, it's our chance to really hit it out of the park on Valencia.
No, I understand. Look, I love trees. I understand what you're saying about trees and beauty. I'm for trees and beauty. But if I have a car and I live on that street and I've been relying on that parking space and it disappears, I'm more concerned about where I'm going to park my car.
Yeah, but if you live on the street, you have 4 parking spaces. If you live in the George, you have 4 parking spaces in your unit. If you live in Biltmore Park, across the street, you have your internal garage. If you live on Beatrice Row or Biltmore Row, you have your parking spaces. So you have to live maybe 1 or 2 blocks away to need that parking space. And it's not like we're eliminating all the parking spaces on the street. We're keeping 7 to 8 parking spaces on that street. But most importantly, we're beautifying the street. We're trying to create a shady canopy so that everybody who wants to take a stroll down the sidewalk can do so in the shade.
No, I understand. But let me ask you something. These bump outs, does that count towards the 26.4% open space that you are required? No. Is this part of your open space?
No, all the open space has to be accommodated within our property lines, within our property.
All right, because that hasn't happened in the past with some projects. Trust me.
Okay, yeah.
It hasn't happened with some projects.
I know for a fact that all our projects.
Okay, so this doesn't account for any of the minimum required open space, okay?
No.
All right. So you're saying you're taking 7 to 8 parking spaces away from the 15 that are currently there. Did we do any study about, are those spaces vacant all the time where we can just give away the parking spaces?
So currently there's, how many, 17 units? So there's currently 17 units in 4 buildings on that site. And those units don't have any garages, 0 garages. So all of those current existing apartments either park on the street or they park in the alley. Those basically, everything is accommodated on the street in the alley. Mm-hmm. Now we're offering 52 spaces for the 13 townhouses, and that's all internal. So that's a car that you're not even seeing. That's a car we're taking off the road, which means that we're not taking up.
No, I understand, but where's the UPS driver? Where is the FedEx driver? Where is the deliveries?
Well,
deliveries. Now you're taking away these spaces that normally would be taken by potentially somebody that lives on that street or the street over, or you're taking away any opportunity for those delivery trucks to have a space to park.
No, there will be space. I don't know if we can pull up the site plan. There will be space for the delivery trucks. We're not getting rid of all parking. We're proposing seven parking spaces. But most importantly, I think we want to make a beautiful city. We want to make a beautiful Valencia. Valencia on that side is horrendous. The only way to do it is to add trees and add bulb outs and add green. Because right now it's an asphalt jungle.
No,
It's
no,
all, you know, if.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I totally understand. But let me ask you this. According to Cheryl Gold, who was a resident who notified us, there are 91 trees on the property. Is that true? There are 91 trees on the property. How many will remain on the property?
Right now, we are relocating or cutting most of them.
Okay, so you want a tree canopy, but you're cutting down almost all of the 91 trees that are currently there. So that's kind of
Well,
like a,
No, but what the street trees is not, is a tree canopy for the pedestrian. That's what it's going to do. It's going to give shade to the sidewalk. The trees that are on the property are not shading the sidewalk. Right now, you can walk there and there's zero shade on the sidewalk.
you know what? Can you show the picture, please, the rendering of the not that, but keep going.
The pedestrian view?
Yeah, where it shows, you know, it's a better depiction. If you could just move forward with that.
For the parking?
No, the frontage, okay, keep going. There was one in daylight that was more of a flat front. Okay, right there. Okay, architecturally, beautiful. But this looks so stark. This looks like a concrete jungle right there. That's a concrete jungle. So as much as you're saying those bulb outs will be providing shade trees, where the heck is the shade there?
You know, honestly, you know, these trees get planted a certain size and then they start growing and then they start filling out. And we are proposing a tighter spacing between trees. And the other thing is that for the rendering, if I show a full tree, we're not going to see the building. And if you go to
Well,
the-
I mean, you could at least have one rendering. I mean, but you don't have one rendering that actually shows that. I mean, it looks like a concrete jungle. It looks like a beautiful structure.
Have you driven around the other townhouses? You have such a hard time seeing the facades of the townhouses because the trees are so large.
Okay. Well,
That's
we
all.
have two people here
Okay.
that we have emails from that are very concerned about the fact that trees are going to be cut down. Lots of trees are going to be cut down, and it's going to take forever to get that shade on that street that you're talking about. Where are these massive oaks going to?
Okay, currently, we are in conversation with the city and the staff to see about relocating the oaks. It's quite challenging because of the size of the oaks and the root balls of the oaks and the lack of access to any good receiving site.
So
But
we may not have any location for them.
Okay. Parallel to that, we have proposed to the city, and this is a conversation, so nothing about this is definitive, but we have proposed to the city that we will improve 2 streets that are very bare right now, which are Biltmore Court and Cardena Street. Those 2 streets don't have much in terms of street trees. And so we're proposing doing bulb outs and adding street trees to create more shade.
Taking more parking spaces away?
Well, you want trees and you want parking and.
Listen, I
it's-
don't have a flying saucer at this point. I've got a car. I need to park it somewhere. Okay, and you're taking away parking spaces. So as much as we want to beautify the city, we also have to think about people's transportation needs,
Yeah.
right?
Are the trees that you're taking away inside the property itself?
Yes.
What shade do those trees give to anybody that's outside that property? Anything?
They don't give any shade to the sidewalk.
Do they give any shade to
They might
anybody
give
else?
shade because of the angle of the sun. They might give shade to the alley.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Just,
none.
okay, because the
none
way
to
I
the
see it,
sidewalk.
you're adding to the area where pedestrians walk.
Yes, I mean, we're,
Listen, when you're talking about tree canopy, you're not talking about just what hangs over a sidewalk. You're talking about when you take an aerial view, there's a canopy. Is this correct or not? You're an architect. A canopy is a canopy. It's not just over a sidewalk. It's a canopy, and there's 91 trees on that property right now. It may not affect the sidewalk at this point in time, but there's 91 trees creating a canopy from the air, right? If you take an aerial view right now, there are 91 trees there. There's a canopy. If you take 91 trees away, there's no canopy.
True, and there's regulations in place to decide, what should be removed, what should be kept, what you should try to relocate. This city is everything about tree canopy, and this developer, I'd have to say, if you look at the other projects, we've shown some on the screen, is also about improving streetscapes, preserving trees. On the Gables Village site, right now, they are relocating, 2 significant trees there. And so you have to balance all these things. You have to balance the right of the developer to be able to design a project that makes sense on this property, parking versus trees on the street, and that's what we're trying to strike, in cooperation with your city staff. So what we have proposed right now, we think is a good option, and we stand by it, and staff is recommending approval. So we think we have struck that balance correctly, but of course, we're open to any input.
Yeah, I just don't like contradictory statements. You want to form a tree canopy, but we're taking away almost 90 trees. That's a contradictory statement.
Well, we're trying to enhance, we are admittedly reducing tree canopy on the property, but in exchange, trying to enhance it on the street and in the neighborhood.
One more question I have. The alley is going to be looked at for a bike ped plan. What am I reading in this? Why would an alleyway be considered as part of the Coral Gables bike ped plan? What are you doing to the alley? You're making improvements for bike and ped. Isn't it a 20-foot alley, and you have incoming, outgoing vehicles on 20 feet?
Yes.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
So yes, there's no bike plan for the alley.
Well, yes.
Get typo?
If you read, and I'm sorry, I don't have the exact page, but it struck me that you're using the alleyway and considering the Coral Gables bike ped plan to make improvements for a bike ped plan in the alleyway. It's in your description.
So maybe it's when I talk about the alley, so we design with a flare style curb cut, as in like the pedestrian.
Now, look specifically, it says bike ped plan, Coral Gables bike ped plan, and it mentions the alleyway.
Can you go into the microphone so the court reporter, please?
So there's 2 alleys, the one in the back that you used to turn into the garage, and then there's, it's like a T, and then there's the alley that comes out to Valencia. So I think what it might be referring to is when the sidewalk crosses over the alley, that sidewalk is part of the bicycle. Do you understand? It's more when it crosses the.
Yeah, I think it's 3 subsection E, the bike pedestrian plan. Right. So what it says is the alley shall be designed with a flare curb cut, which the curb cut is where the alley meets the curb of the street, with a continuous level sidewalk through the alley to create a pedestrian-friendly environment. So the alley coming out to the street is not disrupting the sidewalk; it's the sidewalk that's going through the alley.
Okay.
That's all that means. There's
All
no
right.
bike lane.
But you're
in the
not
alley
putting
or
on,
anything.
okay, that's what I wanted clarified. It was not clear from what I read.
Okay.
All right. I love the architecture. You heard my concerns. I think it's going to be a very stark project for the next 20 years with bulb-out trees only, cutting down almost 90 trees. And if I was a resident that didn't live in that building, and you are currently using those parking spaces, all of a sudden I'm out of luck. So I don't like the fact that a public street is being repurposed for a developer. That's number one, okay? And that's what very clearly it is. It's being repurposed for a developer. And I want to make that very clear on the record. And again, the starkness of the project by taking away the trees, I think there's a better solution here. And especially if you're saying that the mature oaks, there's no place for them, let's face it, they're dead trees at this point in time, is what you're telling me.
So just a quick question. The people that are living there now, where do they park? Don't they park on the street?
In all likelihood, they park on the street.
So you're now taking all those cars off the street and you're tripling the amount of parking spots that you have.
No, they're only taking out 6 parking spaces out of the total 15.
And trip.
10, isn't it?
Right, and then adding the internal ones.
Right, no, well, 7 to 8 parking spaces will be eliminated, and right now there are 15, correct?
But they're adding 32.
But what if those people currently parking there are not living on that property that this is
And they're
on?
living 3 blocks away.
Wherever they're
saying.
living, they're using it.
All right, Javier, would you go next?
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you go back to the site plan? Just real quick. Please. So within your bounded frontage, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a third trees. Because there's a bulb out just outside the limit of your property. Is that part of your project?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, we would do it. It's outside, but we would.
No, my question is it part of your project? Is that part of the public
Yes.
works portion of the project? Okay, so we're getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 trees. Are any of the existing mature oaks
Yes.
being relocated to some of these bulbouts?
That was our initial intention, was to move them into the bulb outs. And then we discovered that there was a 20-inch water transmission line that could not be moved, and it was 4 feet below grade. So we were not able to move any of the specimens out to the bulb outs because of that 20-inch transmission line that is running exactly below those parking spaces.
But you're moving them somewhere else.
Maybe.
Yes,
Said they can't identify
that's
the
what
location.
we're working with the city right now.
But you're committed to moving those trees. It's going to be part of your approval today.
The intent is to relocate those
Right.
trees. Now, what it's going to take, the mechanics of relocating those trees, we're still working on. In part, we're waiting on the demolition of the existing structures to see what the root span is of the existing trees and so forth, to figure out how we can move them and where.
Okay.
A clear path.
Yeah, they're big. You have to go through underneath street lights, and you need a clear path to be able to move something that large down the street. Understood. Got it. And not to mention other trees. So, okay. All right. So right now, it's going to be, because some of those oaks are pretty big. I think there's 3 of them or 4 of them that are there that are really big. And there's a lot of garbage trees. You got a lot of Brazilian peppers that are gone wild, and chifleras and all sorts of just junked stuff that people threw out their window and started growing. And it became a tree, which is, some of them are invasive, I've discovered, in similar projects in the area. Okay. Is, assuming that the trees aren't removed and relocated because it becomes impossible to do so, which is seeming to become more and more likely, is there an equivalent tree canopy replacement that would be then used to mitigate those trees?
Yes, so we've met multiple times with Vice Mayor Anderson and talking about brainstorming as to what else we could do in order to mitigate the trees. And one of her big concerns were those two streets, Cardena Street and Biltmore Court, which don't have street trees, they don't have bulb outs. And so she wanted to create more canopy on that. And so we presented an idea of adding street trees and street trees and bulb outs on those 2 streets. And that's a conversation.
And they don't have the water main.
They don't have it's not just a water main, it's a 20-inch.
Yeah, I understand what it is.
Cannot be tapped into at
Transmission.
all.
No, it's a transmission line going, it's
Transmission,
regional.
not even a
So it's-
distribution, a transmission.
All right. Okay. Seems reasonable to me. I like the project. I like the very subtle changes in the frontage to give some relief to the building. And I think I can see where you saw the Royal Crescent in Bath and the development of the design, I think it's admirable project.
Thank you, Javier. Felix?
So I have a few questions. In one of the letters that we were given, just reading from the tree canopy component, because obviously this is, just tell me if it's wrong. The proposed elimination of 91 trees on the property while only 12 were identified by the arborist as in poor condition and recommended for removal. Is that true or not?
I'll ask our arborist to come up here and address it. Jeff, if you can. Yep.
And is he also the landscape architect, or he's just, you're only the arborist on this project?
My name is Jeff Szymanski, and I'm a consulting arborist. I am not a landscape architect.
Could you state your address for the record, please?
7330 Southwest 55 Avenue, Miami.
The reason I ask that is because the second question really has to do with the landscape architect. Now, I did look at the landscape drawings in detail. And the second question is, the code requires 24 shade trees on the property, 0 are being provided. So I don't know if you could address it also.
No, I can address what's on the property, and I can discuss tree relocation, and I can discuss horticulture. But I didn't do the design.
Is there a mitigation loss? Because it says mitigating the loss of contributing approximately $100,000 to the tree fund does little to offset the loss of benefits of mature trees and does not provide the replacement in the neighborhood.
Let me correct, because that is not totally correct. So to mitigate the trees that are being removed would be $350,000, not $100,000. That would be $350,000 to mitigate the trees that are being removed. And although we're not providing 24 large tree specimens, we are providing 46 medium to small trees, which is really what you can do on townhouse sites. I mean, that,
I'm sorry, on this site you have 46 trees that you're providing on the site?
yes,
So besides the bump outs, are those trees
those
from the
trees
edge of the
are-
sidewalk
yes,
to the face of the
exactly.
building?
So
Okay.
there's, they're pretty much around the property. And then there's some terraces on the second floor of.
I saw that on the rear
and
elevation.
each one of those terraces has a pair of native Simpson stoppers.
Right.
So right there, 13 times 2 is 26.
Yep.
And so if you add all the others, it's 46. But it's
Okay.
46
Okay.
small to medium trees.
Right.
It's
So-
very difficult to incorporate a large tree.
So
But we
if
have
you were-
46, which is what we can incorporate in the project.
So if you were mitigating everything, it'd be $300,000, but you're mitigating approximately $100,000 because that's the balance of what you can't complete?
No, I think the mitigation right now,
Right?
so what we're taking out minus what we are adding new would be the 350,000. It might end up less if we do end up doing the two street canopy improvement projects on Cardena and Biltmore, because obviously that money, the 350,000, would go towards introducing street trees on Cardena and Biltmore.
Or is
But
there?
that's not final yet. That idea is not final. It's in
More or less,
conversation.
More or less, it's a conversation, right? So if you were stroking a check to the city for their tree fund, is there an amount that you've been kicking around so far?
That number, the $350,000, is potentially what the maximum payment would be in tree mitigation.
Okay, so also, this person wrote, transplanting the live oaks into bump outs is misguided. Obviously, you can't do it because of the water transmission line. So that's off the table. And the other thing that has been brought up over and over and over, and I know that there have been discussions, and that is that, planting new live oaks compared to other trees? Because it seems like not only do you have an issue with the water line, but it seems like, we keep putting all of our eggs in one basket. In other words, all one species instead of others. And the arborist can tell you that, you get one plague of any type and you knock out most of your trees. The ficus, is that a native?
No.
Is that an Aurelius ficus?
You mean
or
the
is that-
ficus on site, tree 61?
Right.
That's a tree that Miami-Dade County, Durham wants you to remove when you develop a site. That's a Ficus benjamina.
Okay.
That's a large tree. Actually,
But it's not a native if it's
it's,
Benjamina.
no, it's from Malaysia. It's not a native.
Right.
And it's in moderate condition. It's not a good tree for relocation.
No.
As a matter of fact,
He
in
wants
the
you to get rid
long
of it.
term, if that tree was kept, it would have to be cut down substantially because there's so much decay in the trunk.
Right. And then because if it was an Aurelius, then you're talking about a native tree, and you would try to save it if it was in good shape.
If it was in good condition, I would recommend it. We also need to remember that there are many invasive species on this site, and most of the trees are palms, number-wise.
Right. Right.
It's not 91
And-
hardwood trees.
And what are most of the trees that you're planting between the back of the sidewalk and the face of the building?
A variety of things. I think we have peach and plum on one side, we have Japanese blueberries.
Okay.
We have some spot.
It's not just a bunch of solitaires or something like that.
No, there's some ski areas where we have a few homes,
Right.
but we're trying to get.
Okay, you've clarified that. Thank you. So the next issue is there in this letter about the endangered species Florida bonneted bat. I know that created a lot of heartburn for the developers next to the zoo, and I know that this is a fairly new law where they're looking at it very, very carefully at Durham, and I wanted to know if have you done any analysis on that yet? Because it's going to be obviously required for your tree permit and for your demolition of the building.
To my knowledge, we haven't done that assessment. We will have to do it, though, as part of the Durham review of building permit.
I think that's, a heads up for the developer because that could become a real headache for you. And I know that there are bats because I see them when I run in, early in the morning. And as far as the residential parking, the largest impact, of course, of the residents and, well-known visitors to them where they would be allowed to park in the back. Your trash pickup, et cetera, is around the back alley. So they would pull the containers out and they would be picked up by Waste Management or whomever. Why did you leave the green buffer that you left with the building that's under construction to your east? Okay, a 10-foot strip or something like that? I couldn't see the dimension. Okay, and that's where you have some of your landscaping also?
Can you talk into the microphone for the reporter? Thank you.
Sorry.
It is where we're planning on hiding a lot of the things that we don't like to see from the sidewalk. So meaning, the backflow preventers and the FPL transformer towards the alley side. So we're using that 10-foot to take care. Also, we will be using that sort of for drainage.
Okay.
10-foot. We'll
But you'll probably have to put a well or something in there.
exactly.
And then, and these are fee simple, you said? Okay, with a homeowners association? Just to clean.
Master Homeowners Association, not a
Right.
homeowners association
Right.
for the project.
Right, but not a condo. Right. So, okay, and then the last question for our city attorney, is I'm a little confused. I thought that part of the issue that occurred on the properties north of Biltmore compared to the properties south of Biltmore guaranteed that there would be no more than a certain height south of Biltmore. Am I mistaken?
I think that's a different issue. That was,
Different
this one's, I think
No,
our
I
planning
know,
official can explain the difference there, right?
I know they're under the height, but I just want to make sure because it's a little confusing, since it started as a mistake and then it was fixed and, but the thing is that, you kept saying, well, we're allowed 150 feet. I know you're well below anything you're allowed, but I wanted to make sure that it was right.
Right, so anything south of Biltmore Way that is zoned MF4 doesn't have the allowance to do additional height or additional FAR and density for med bonus.
So the height was allowed, but not the intensity?
Height, intensity, and density, those three things are not allowed as far as a bonus south of Biltmore Way.
So what is the allowable height?
150,
Okay, and what is the allowable height north of that? 190?
190.5.
Okay, so that is the difference. The difference is the med bonus.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And in this area, it must be med without any bonuses.
Yes, I believe so, yes.
Yeah, this whole area. Am I mistaken?
That was definitely the case with the MFSA zoning. You remember that, when it was adopted
Yeah,
to sort of address
I
this?
remember it, yep.
I'm pretty sure it was continued under MF4, but, I'll check that
Okay.
to make sure.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. I want to compliment the architect and the entire team on a design very well done, in my opinion. I'm not an architect, but I think it's a very well done design. I see that we have responsible developers in this project with a lot of experience developing within our city. This building to me incorporates the feel of Coral Gables, and I think the name is fitting for the George, because I think it actually incorporates a vision that I see that he has. I don't have any issues. I am in favor of the project. Is there,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve.
we
This
have a motion
project-
to,
We're going to need two separate motions,
correct.
please.
So on the first item,
On the
E1,
first item, E1, I would like to make a motion to approve the project as presented and as recommended by staff with the staff recommended conditions.
Second.
we have a first, we have a second. Any discussion?
I'll support the motion, but I do not support staff's recommendation on charging for parking.
So if you don't support staff.
I'm going to support it. I'm going to support it, but I just want to voice my opinion.
Okay. Yes, Ann.
And I have a reservation. I mean, I would vote for this, but I have a strong reservation against using public property for a developer's purposes. And also the notion of this is going to increase a tree canopy is just not the case.
Thank you, Sue. Any other comments? No. Call the roll on E1, please.
Javier Salman,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
Sue Kowalinsky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
ABS and staff.
Yes. Do we have a motion on E2?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion on item E2, that we approve the staff's recommendation and the project
As presented.
as presented.
Do we have a second? Julio is the second. Any discussion? No. Call the roll, please.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
Sue Kowalinsky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Salman,
Yes.
ABS and staff.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Wish everybody a good night and a
you.
safe drive back home.
Safe and dry
Thank you.
drive home.
Let's take a 5-minute recess, and then we'll continue.
Recording stopped.
Yeah, we need Jill.
Are we back on though?
I think someone told them it was over.
We just need her to start the recording.
Sully maybe could do it, Sully.
Sally,
Sully,
can you run the computer till Jill gets back?
can you press record?
But it's in,
Yeah, it's on Jane Street, New York City.
oh, okay.
Right in downtown.
Oh, the Jane, okay, got it.
But it's all like
Isn't that Hell's Kitchen? Jane?
exactly, that's how it's. Yeah,
Oh, she's there.
That's where I was born.
Elvis is
Recording
back
in
the building.
progress.
All right, let's go ahead and come back into session. The next item is E4, Madam City Attorney.
E4 is an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for text amendments to the City of Coral Gables Official Zoning Code, Article 15, notices, Section 15-102, notice to require mail notice of Board of Architects meetings to consider granting Mediterranean-style bonus, providing for repeated provisions, severability clauses, codification, and providing for an effective date.
So
Thank you.
good evening, Jennifer Garcia, planning official. I have one slide for this that shows the different mailing, noticing requirements. If I could have the slide, please. No, that's fine. So right now, there's no, perfect. All right, so if you look at the top row of process, that's for a conditional use site plan review for sites that are more than 20,000 square feet, and that's the threshold. And the bottom one is showing smaller parcels that are just kind of Coral Gables by right, that would just go through Board of Architects to building permits. So the mailing noticing processes get a little more stringent as you go through the process. So DRC, for example, is our first, public meeting that you have, and that's required to post the property, and it's required mail notice for right-of-way vacation. Then it proceeds to Board of Architects. Board of Architects is just posting the property, no matter if it's just preliminary review or if it's med bonus, granting med bonus by Board of Architects. After that, depending on what the process is, it goes to planning and zoning, which has a full-fledged, posting the property, mail notice, email, legal ad, and then to City Commission for those same requirements. So what's proposed before you today is to require a mail notice for those med bonus applications before the Board of Architects. This will be required not only for those properties that are greater than 20,000 square feet, they'll be required to go to City Commission for approval, but also the ones that are smaller, that go straight to building permit after they get their approval from the Board of Architects. So that's the change.
Thank you. Jill, do we have anybody in chambers for this item?
No,
Chambers are empty, sorry.
on Zoom, no.
On Zoom and on phone platform? I'll go ahead and close it for public comment. Sue?
Like I said at the last meeting, the more we can notify residents of what's happening in their neighborhoods, the better. So I'm good with this.
Okay. Chip?
No, I'm good.
Felix?
Ditto.
Wow. Julio? Robert?
Let me tell you an experience I'm going through right now. I'm ready to submit to the Board of Architects a project, and we've been waiting almost 6 weeks to try to get the neighborhood to do a meeting. And we cannot get consensus from the neighborhood when they would like to meet. And we cannot submit to the BOA because unless you meet with the residents, you can submit. And we've been going at it 5-6 weeks. And I think you know the 760 Ponds project.
Yes.
And I can't get a consensus to meet with the residents. So you cannot submit until you meet with them. And that could go on for months.
But does that have anything to do with this?
Well, because this has notices. And the further you put the notices, this went from, what was the original diameter that you had to notify? 1,000?
That's not changing yet. It's saying 1,000 for this.
This is staying, but I
Yes, yes.
thought I read 1,500 No?
1,500, if, that's right in the code right now, 1,500 if it's change of land use. Like you're changing the comprehensive plan, future land use map, which is what it is right now. This is only requiring mail notice for Board of Architects. There's no change in the radius, no change in the timing, no additional meetings. It's just, in addition to posting the property, if someone is requesting Mediterranean bonus, they would also do mail notice.
Which is goes to the point the problem I'm going now is that for the Board of Architects, you got to get the residents more notices. And if you cannot, I don't have a problem sending notices. I have a problem is like, until you meet with them, you cannot submit. So the more notice that you're going to send, the more difficult it becomes.
I disagree with that. I just think that's a separate issue. But, I do have one caveat to this. There's written in here that the board doesn't want any public comment during the meetings. I totally disagree with that because just like we have emailed, we got emails here, no one actually reads them into the record. And I'm not so sure that other board members don't actually read the emails either. So I think it has to be either you can allow public comment or the emails that are submitted have to be read in public during that meeting. Look, if residents are upset enough and they show up, they should be heard. So I do have that caveat to this.
Yeah, so that's not what was proposed today. That was the recommendation from the Board of Architects. But what was proposed today is normal.
And there is a public comment period during the Board of Architects meeting, so yes, there would be public comment.
Okay, but the way it's written there, it says only email comments, email or e-comments are allowed.
That wasn't staff's proposal, or that's not the proposal that's before you today. That was a comment or feedback from the Board of Architects.
Okay, so that's not part of this resolution.
No, it's not.
Correct.
Okay.
Javier, you have a question?
Small one. What's the cost implication to the applicant?
Oh, I forgot to bring that. I think it was 2,000 or 3,000 average, including all the postage and all the work to be done. And that would be added not to the applicant, well, it would be added to the applicant through increase of the med bonus fee.
Okay.
Because staff is going to be the one, for the commissioner, staff is going to be the one doing the mailing.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Any other comments? I'm fine with the notice. Just, Madam City Attorney, I'm just curious, and it does not have to do with what we're looking at, as Sue said, but if Robert, for example, or an architect is trying to set up a meeting, and for some reason he can't get that meeting, what's the procedure?
So I'm not aware, I haven't heard before of having this issue of, of trouble coordinating the meeting. These meetings, I believe, are coordinated by the developer, right, Jennifer?
Correct, yes.
And so I think that they have to just set a date and a location that's within proximity of their proposed project, and then they mail out the notice. So perhaps, I don't know his particular case, but perhaps there's a unique situation or some particularly vocal residents that are not available, I'm not sure. But it's a matter of scheduling a date, choosing a date within the timeframes, and providing the mail notice.
Robert, up in that area, a lot of it's city of Miami.
Well, and that's the other thing. You gotta notify the city of Miami, and you gotta notify not only Coral Gables, because it says if you're abutting another municipality, you gotta
500 feet.
do that too,
Yes.
right?
I think it's 500 feet.
In my case, yes, you're absolutely right. We gotta notify the city of Miami.
All right, so anybody like to make a motion on the item before us right now on E4?
I'd like to move it. Staff recommend.
We have
gonna second.
Felix, we have Chip on a second. Any comments?
It's a motion to recommend.
Right. Sorry.
No comments? Call the roll, please.
Robert Behar,
No.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
Zuka Valensky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Salman,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Good.
ABS and staff.
Yes.
Robert.
All right, the last item on the agenda, Madam City Attorney, E5.
So E5 is an ordinance of the City Commission providing for a text amendment to the City of Coral Gables official zoning code, amending section 14-202.6, building site determination, to facilitate building site determination applications, providing for severability, repeater, codification, and for an effective date.
Good evening. Good evening, Arceli Redila, Zoning Administrator. The last item for tonight. So the proposed item before you tonight is regarding building site determination, Section 14206 of the zoning code. So as you may all know, can I please have the presentation? Okay. As you may all know, building site determination is required for single-family dwelling and duplex building to go through building site determination. That is required prior to building issuance, permit issuance. Now, that is to ensure that there is a buildable site. So the process is that an applicant would submit an application for building site determination, and then that would be reviewed by the DRO. In this case, the DRO is me. I am the one who reviewed and processed this application. If the DRO determines that the site is buildable, a letter will be issued to the applicant, and then they can go through the building permit process. If the DRO denies the application because it does not meet those criteria, the applicant may have the option to submit for a conditional use process, asking the City Commission eventually. So there's like, if they move forward with what they're proposing, they go through the DRC, they go to the Board of Architects before you for recommendation, and then ultimately to the City Commission. Now, with that, when you are recommending an approval, when you're considering this, there are criteria. And this criteria, the application must satisfy 3 of the 4 criteria below, which is that the building created would have a street frontage equal or larger than the majority of the building site within 1,000 feet radius of the subject property. Now, the building site separated or established would not result in any nonconformities. And the third one is that there's no restrictive covenants, encroachments, easements, unity of title, and all that. And that the building site created has been owned by the current owner for at least 10 years. Now, what we are proposing here is to eliminate C, because this is already addressed in other areas of the code. It's kind of like a redundant. So with this, to streamline that, and we recognize that there is that redundancy, what we're proposing is to eliminate C, and instead of satisfying 3 of 4, we'll be satisfying 2 of 3. And with that, this went to the City Commission for first reading, here for you, and going back to the City Commission. So staff is hoping for your recommendation.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Jill, do we have anybody
No.
in any of the platforms? No? Let's go ahead and close it for public comment. Chip?
You know, the letter used to be given by the building department, correct?
Yes, it still go through the Development Services Department.
Okay, I'm not sure with the city's org chart. So is your department inside the building department?
Yes. Planning and zoning is under Development Services.
And you report to?
To Development Services.
Okay. And so let me get this straight. So if I own a piece of property and I get a building site determination letter because I want to build on it,
Mm-hmm.
I would write you a letter and you would say, and is that letter good for how long? As long as?
1 year. 1 year. 1 year.
And then after 1 year?
After 1 year, you have 1 year to submit a building permit, essentially.
And then that letter is revoked and they have to start the process all over again?
If within 1 year, they have to go back to us, and then we either extend the letter or do an analysis again. If there's anything that changes, if there's nothing changes, then that letter could be extended, or
Okay.
We will issue another letter.
Okay, and so the other question I have is about an existing structure. That would be a fence, a tennis court, septic tank, a wall,
Or even part of the main structure.
or
right?
even a part of the existing or a structure. It could be any driveway.
Yes, all of those is considered. But typically, this building site determination process only happens when the site is more than one lot, like
Right.
1, 2, 3.
Right, where it's tied together, when you want to
Yes.
separate. And then the last question I have is the requirement about properties within 1,000 feet. if the property is smaller, say it's 49 feet instead of 50 feet.
For the minimum street frontage is 50 feet.
I know, but let's
They
say.
need to meet it.
Okay, let's say it comes up at 49 feet. Is there an appeal process to,
They would have to analyze all those properties within 1,000 feet. Typically, they would give us a table, all the streets, all the houses in that street, in that lot within 1,000
Right.
feet, and then we'll average it. Typically, all the sites should meet the minimum lot, which is 50 by 100.
okay, I'm good, thanks.
You know, for me, Chip, I mean, going on what you asked about encroachments and covenants, I've served on the planning and zoning board for many, many years on and off. One of the taboos that I've always seen is if you have anything that crosses the property line,
Right,
whether it's a wall, a fence, I haven't heard of a septic tank that's built. You can't undo that covenant.
right.
And I have seen, as of late, a lot of covenants being undone on people that say, we have 4 lots or 2 lots, and now we want to build 2 homes. And I've always been in the position that if you have something that crosses that property line, you shouldn't be able to undo it. So for me, I have an issue when you're going to take away. I understand it's redundant, but if you're going to go ahead and strike that out completely, just piggybacking on what you said, to me, I have an issue on it.
Can I perhaps just clarify
Yeah,
a little
please.
bit here? So this doesn't change the requirements for when it's a building site determination that's made by the DRO.
Yes,
This-
yes. So there are criteria when I'm analyzing as a DRO, when the first step, right? There are criteria. So the first is that there's no more than one building site. One of those criteria actually is that there are no encroachments, including fences, walls, and other associated improvements with that building site, which typically
that ties
travels
it
with a
together.
unity of title. Yes, it's already in there. And if there's a unity of title on the site, that me as a DRO would automatically deny that, and it will go through the motion of going for a conditional.
So
Got it.
this
So
is
that's
making
how-
changes to
okay.
the process that would allow someone to go through the process that comes to Planning and Zoning Board and the City Commission. This
I
is not
understand.
changing the way it's done administratively by staff.
Now I
Yes.
understand.
So this is just would allow perhaps additional properties to be able to go through this conditional use process that comes through to the public hearing process here and at commission. And the rationale is that a restrictive covenant cannot be released by staff anyway. Only the city commission can release a restrictive covenant. So if the encroachment no longer exists, right, and it cannot have been demolished within the prior 10 years. So it no longer exists, and then they want to go through this building site determination process, through the conditional use process, and go to commission, they can do that, and then, because ultimately it would be up to the commission whether to release that covenant. They have the authority to release the covenant.
right.
So if the commission is willing to grant them that conditional use, then they can necessarily provide for release of the covenant.
But if C was still there, then could they not
They
go
would be
through the
precluded,
process?
they would be precluded from even going through the
I'd have
process.
to go through a lot split or something like that. How do you deal with
but
the easement?
I'm sorry, hold on.
I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry, I thought you were
Whoever wants to.
My question was, my concern is there's been a bunch of properties that have come before this board for a lot split that technically her department would have had to say you can't,
Correct.
but it's come by through this board anyways.
And that's still going to happen. This doesn't change that. This just allows perhaps additional properties that would have been told you don't meet the threshold to even go to commission, to then come through the process.
You're talking about the barbecue incident.
Yeah, that's one of the incidents. Well, there was one property that we saw clearly was stated as 2 properties, but there's actually another property which I'm talking about. But
We had one recently.
Yeah.
I think since we were here when I first started 2017, there were only 2 building site determination requests that came before the board, which is the Sunset one and some more.
Right.
Can I ask a question? So was this brought up by a commissioner? Was this brought up by an individual? Was this brought up only by staff?
This was as instructed by the city commission, and that's why we are bringing it here.
But I mean, is it like a specific commissioner or is it the commission in whole? They said, we want you guys to take a look at this, staff, and
The sponsor of the item, this already went for first reading, in fact.
Yes, it was sponsored by Commissioner Castro,
okay.
but the
So-
commission approved on first reading.
Yes.
I'm in full agreement with the chairman. I think, redundancy, I think is in aviation, check, double check. You miss it. Things get clouded, in over the years. My biggest concern, and you say, you've seen these, I've seen them. I've seen also big public hearings where they've been denied, where people said, well, I could easily have 2 big lots, but listen, that's not the way it was. My biggest concern in the preservation of the city of Coral Gables, as we have known it in the past, is site-specific zoning regulations. They are under constant attack. And for me, the Board of Adjustment has always been a very important board, which is now almost shriveled up to nothing as far as the cases that go before.
The Board of Adjustment does not review this.
No, I understand. I'm just giving an example. As far as, the bending of certain things, setbacks and things like that. And one of the things that makes Coral Gables special is that when you go before the Board of Adjustment,
It's got to be a hardship.
it has to be a hardship, not a self-imposed hardship.
Agreed.
Not many people ever do that. And that's what makes, or supposedly makes us stricter. But then all of a sudden you get into pads and things like that, and you could kind of, it as well as anyone, you could push this or you could push that, and all of a sudden it's just different. And I have a huge concern with the site-specific zoning regulations because we have in our code, in Appendix A, 57 pages of restrictions of properties throughout the city. And I've seen where they could be altered by the commission in a majority, but they don't make it to commission sometimes. And I have a real concern with that, the same as I have a real concern with this. I am of the opinion is that if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
So
But you
this
need
is not a site-specific zoning
It's not a
regulation.
site-specific.
This is simply a modification to the
No,
process.
I know it's not a site-specific. I'm saying these are relatively similar issues. And it's the same thing as, because the stricter, I think, the stricter you make certain elements, the more you're preserving the quality of life of why people live in this city.
But Felix, not necessarily because, and maybe if you have one site that you could say, I could maybe build a larger home versus if there's a determination that you could have 2 lots, so you could do 2 smaller homes, which is maybe the flip side. I don't know if that has to do with it, because I'd rather personally, if I live in an area, have 2 smaller homes than 1 larger home.
Well, I'll tell you a story. The property next door to my property, we have a 10,000 square foot double lot. And most of the houses there are either 100 foot wide, 125 foot wide. Some are 75, very few, just the way the math worked out when they were building at a time. There was a parcel there was an issue right about an inch and there's some type of story going back to a card game or whatever. The point was that eventually they got it cleared, and they put this smaller house, 2-story house. They have no rear yard because we're on septic tank, so they had to push that, slam it all the way to the back. They've got maybe 6-7 feet in the back, almost unusable. They've got a barbecue out there. Great people, great neighbors. But the problem is that then it gets to the point that you got 2 grown-up children, you have 2 adults, you have 4 cars. It's not the same. You alter the compatibility of the neighborhood. They do have in here right now, which has existed forever, about the percentages of lots and the widths and that kind of thing. So I'm for looking at this very carefully because, they're just taking out covenants, encroachments, easements, and these words mean something. And you could stretch it to another place. I know that we're being told it's in other parts of the code, but I'd like to see it on the front, the first chapter.
So if I can clarify, it's not that only the city commission can release those covenants. So if this is just addressing the process by which someone who's making this request can get to city commission. So if the city commission is considering it anyway, the city commission has the ability to decide whether to release the covenant, which it wouldn't necessarily have to do if it were to approve this.
To me, with all due respect, it just seems like, when you're putting yourself in the hands of the development director, which could be an engineer and not a person that's qualified in planning or zoning, and all of a sudden they're the ones that can make a determination like this. I have a real problem with that. Pardon me, but back in the day, we had people that were extremely qualified, and their first priority was maintaining the consistency of these neighborhoods throughout the city of Coral Gables. I have a real issue with that because this is like the last place where you could protect the quality of life of our residents, where they live, where their largest investment is in many cases, in most cases. I have a real problem with this. When I saw it, it was, there's no reason to change this to make it more expeditious to be able to go through a lot change.
So it's not more expeditious. It's not more expeditious. It's just simply facilitating certain properties that otherwise would not be able to do it. So that it is doing. It is facilitating it or not streamlining, facilitating for certain properties that would not currently qualify.
For me, I'll tell you what facilitating is for the residents. My neighbor across the street took him 3.5 years to get a building permit for his swimming pool. Took him 3.5 years. Robert is complaining about, people not returning the thing because of a process issue. In this particular case, I just want to have more protection for the residents. I have an issue with it. I just don't see the advantage of anything that we're discussing where it's going to protect, that neighbor from a lot split. And if the commission wants to split a lot, they can split a lot anywhere.
No, they cannot. There's some properties that do not qualify with this requirement. So that the commission doesn't get to see those. So that's the purpose of this.
Which one doesn't qualify?
There's certain properties that would have they do not meet 3 out of these 4 criterias.
Oh, no, that's fine.
So the commission doesn't get to decide to do that. They don't get to, the applicant doesn't get there. They don't qualify to even get to commission. So this would certainly facilitate additional properties being able to go through that process.
Okay. I just don't, I just don't think it's a good idea. That's all I have to say.
Sue?
I just want to clarify that during staff's review, my review as DRO, I also have to check those. I have to check if there's any unity of title. And if there is, then that's one of the criteria for it to be denied, and then it gets to the city commission.
Yeah, I personally am for this because it does allow more properties to go through the process. You always have the commission as the stopgap, right? So I'm actually for it.
Javier?
I don't have any problem with it.
Okay. Julio?
No problem.
Copycat.
Anybody like to make a motion?
Make a motion to deny this
You have a motion
legislative action?
to deny. Is there a second?
I'll second so we can vote on it.
We have a second to deny. Any comments? Call the roll, please.
Julio Gabriel,
No?
Sue Kavalinsky,
No.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Salman,
No.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
He's confused.
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes.
I'll move approval of the motion.
So just
I'll move- yeah,
just
the
to be
staff's
clear,
recommendation.
the
Motion to deny passed.
motion to deny passed.
Correct.
That's it.
Would you like to make a motion to adjourn, Chip?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
We are coming to, if I might to the chair, we're coming to the end of a period where we all need to do our reporting, our financial statements, so
July 1st.
which should probably happen before our next meeting. So I think this would be a good time just to remind anybody who still needs to do it to get it in
Electronically now.
electronically now.
Yes.
You all should have received an email, right?
Yes.
Is it-
Several.
Several, yes. I have.
Jill is very, very
Especially,
good.
especially the different, multiple municipalities.
Yes, exactly. We have a motion and we have a second. Everybody in favor to adjourn, say aye. Aye.
All right.
Aye. Thank you very much, everybody.